like only listen to podcasts they're interested in are going to look at the description. Oh, do we not have descriptions in our episodes?
I'm trying. I got to add a little bit more for the future Goonhammer ones.
Which is actually great for that episode. I think that description is perfect. West Coast, best coast, Din. I'm a little outnumbered on the podcast. So.
Yeah, goofy time zone thing. That one. Riverside tab.
Diz, the video that we recorded, I did drop in the Patreon chat before it's public on the YouTube channel, so that our patrons get the first chance to kind of check it out.
And that was for MCP?
No, that's for Shatterpoint. It's first video going up on my channel. I was more focused on your face than the background. I was trying to make you look proportionately sized to me. That was the goal. Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, I'm 6'2". I'm in the big guy category. And I didn't realize until like I was watching like a YouTube video about basketball players and average heights came up. And I didn't realize how much I'm in like top 5% of height or something on the planet. I think they said like 5'9" is the average height. But I don't, yeah.
What?
What's the weather like down there?
We're 5'10".
Funny thing was, so many of the guys I was around when I was in my late teens, early 20s, all said they were like 5'11", 6 foot. And so I always had this really poor perception of height. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, you guys are all just adding 2 inches to your height. Okay. That's why I'm so confused. Yeah. Aren't you a little small to be a stormtrooper? Damn.
Have to be or made to be? I think they're genetically modified, aren't they?
Oh, we can hear you.
Yeah, you're there.
By the way, he was answering your question, but you just still can't hear him.
Okay, that should be fixed now. Thank you for saying it. I'm glad you said it before we actually like started like anything. You just missed a whole lot of like probably quarter of the conversation. You just depends on which canon you go by. Expanded universe stormtroopers even came in aliens. See, that's something that, like never really talked about is like alien stormtroopers. You just think they're all like Terran, like they're humans or human-esque. Does Star Wars call humans Terrans? I never really cared to
No,
read.
because Terra is Earth.
Okay, so what do they call humans? Just humans?
Humans, yeah.
Oh, okay. That's fair. It's the same thing, though. But
Not there, it's not. It's in a galaxy far, far away. There's no Terra.
fair enough. All right, I think we're ready to go. I think we can hit the road, as they say.
Let's road the hit.
Let's road the hit. Is there any last minute changes, or did everybody look over the agenda?
I assume Matt is going to guide us through the terrain.
I looked it over and then promptly put it away.
That's fair. Yeah, I just figured I'd just say, Matt, take away the show, and then we just go that way. All right,
He's back. Let him run it.
Yeah.
it's his turn. All right,
I think that's the right Mattitude.
Wow, you are punny tonight. Alrighty, we're gonna hit some.
It's like steak
buttons.
jokes, rare, medium, well done.
Okay, hitting buttons.
It's counting down.
Welcome, my young apprentice.
Stretch out with your feelings. I can bring you in warm, or I can bring you in cold.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Rogue Support. We are here for you, and you are here for us, and we will always be in your corner of the cantina, and I'm just going to ramble on here. Thank you for listening, as always, and those watching on the Twitch, thank you for coming and joining the show. If you'd like to join the discussion in the Discord, there will be a link in the description. If it does not work again for some reason, please let me know so I can fix it. And big thank you to the patrons for supporting us. We got 2 new patrons this week. We got Qui-Gon Din, who has been amazing. Thank you for all the just conversations that you've been talking about and just keeping the chatter going. And the other one,
Din!
and then the other one was, where'd it go? Oh, you guys erased my thing. This is
We
quality.
erase nothing. Do not
Please-
blame
okay.
us for this.
You erased it.
Gotta race the internet.
I am
Yeah.
looking forward to this week at work having like Din actually talking in the Discord. I'm like, man, there's gonna be so much shit to talk about. It's gonna be great.
I'm such a terrible person because I can't actually see his name because it's in streamer mode. It starts with an A though. I'm so sorry that I can't say the full name. Thank you, A. Thank you for joining the patron and supporting the show.
A for awesome.
A for awesome. And we have joined forces with the Goonhammer Media Network to further promote the game and continue to produce quality content. Go check them out. All right, hot takes, cold drinks. Let's go, Accuser. What is your hot take and cold drink?
Cold drink. I'm doing an old fashioned tonight. I was out of beer. Hot take. Hot and Chewy. Like they're a really good secondary, and I keep looking at them with Lando, and I think they're going to be or not secondary, support. I'm looking at Matt's face. No, I keep looking at them with Lando. I think there's going to be some really interesting gimmicks with Payday and Lando's identity that they'll be able to do. You know, you can make them Galactic Empire Scout based on that timing. Fun fact. Yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty excited about them right now, and hot take, they're better than you think.
That's
Okay,
the
then.
second time you've had this hot take. So
No,
I'm
it's
giving you a
not.
Rancor face.
I've
I
actually
think
played them now. I can have that hot
Oh,
take.
wait,
Matt
no,
had that
Matt-
hot
Person
take.
was made.
That was Matt's. Okay, all right.
We're
No
both
Rancor
bearded,
face
but come
from
on.
you. Yeah.
No,
That
I'm now
was the-
seconding it weeks later because I've tried them and can vouch for it.
It
That
was
means
one of the episodes
Omnus.
before I came back. I was listening as a customer, I was part of the audience.
You were never a customer for your own podcast, even when you were on hiatus.
All right, fair enough. Let's go over to Matt. What are you drinking? What are you thinking?
So first off, our other patron is Always Be Crabbin.
Thank you.
Always be crabbing.
I was trying to look for it, but I got called on first.
Yeah, that's why I scroll. As soon as you got called on, I started scrolling. I am drinking another local beer, so it's from Broken Goblet Brewing. It is called No One Likes Us, We Don't Care, which is it's a Philadelphia sports reference. But it is.
You're
an
right. No one
IPA.
likes you.
No, it's one of like the fight songs for the soccer team here, the Philadelphia Union.
Okay.
But
Is
it's
the
unfortunate I
mouthfeel
can say.
gritty?
No, it's too many puns. And my hot take is gonna be more of a lukewarm take because I'm gonna build onto something that Omnus, it was either last week or when we were at Nova, one of the ones I wasn't on, because those are the ones I listened to. The real hot take is I don't listen to episodes that I'm on because why? But no, my lukewarm
You and me
take,
both.
my lukewarm take is actually about Wrecker, and I know you were talking a lot about Wolf, but really how you had thought that Wrecker wasn't kind of keeping up as much. So I played this past weekend and took Wrecker out of my list in a standard event and ran just Rex Crosshair and didn't miss Wrecker once, and made a note to myself going in, like every time I drew one of those two, I'm like, would this rather have been Wrecker? And it never was. So it wasn't happening with Destiny. So that's my lukewarm take because I'm just kind of stealing what you had mentioned last week. But I do think I think Wrecker gets a little too auto added to everything with Hunter and Bad Batch and clones, which I don't think is necessary. So
I agree with
Fair.
that. I always find Wrecker kind of disappointing, so I'm glad to hear someone else say it.
I mean, with the cast, I think that's lukewarm, but I feel like it's hard to sway the community off Wrecker. Like the community is all universally like Wrecker's the shit, and yeah, I think Crosshairs. Man, I need to actually play Crosshair. Is what I need to do.
Dude's
he
good.
I drew him. I played him 7 times, and 5 of his activations he killed somebody.
I mean,
That's
that's
all he
that's
does.
bad.
And gets to reposition 2 to 3 times, like gets the full move 2 to 3 times in a turn as well. So
He's fast on top of being able to just one-shot things. Like he can be on the other side of the board if you really set it up on the ingresses.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's it for me.
All right. Omnis, do you have a hot take that hasn't been on the show before?
I think so. You're gonna have to tell me if this is too adjacent to your hot take, but I think I'm different. But I'm gonna be curious on your thoughts. So first off, I am drinking Ninkasi Tricera Hops Double IPA. Going full hops up in this B. Just shaking it up a little bit. I can't always drink space dust. My hot take is kind of multi-part. I know Dizzard, you shadowbox occasionally. Matt and Accuser, do you guys ever play a game against yourself?
I have a lot of long, stupid meetings where I will just have TTS running in the background.
I have not, but I've debated it.
Okay. So this is even a conversation. Like I remember having this chat with Michael Plummer, the main Shatterpoint guy. We were talking about it. This was pre-Shatterpoint. This was actually before he worked at AMG, but when we were just like we got like a game of MCP together, and I was talking about how shadowboxing was a little bit easier in MCP than it was for War Machine, because when you're just going activation, right, it's easier to shadowbox than when you're trying to do an entire, like, activate my entire army, and then you activate your entire army. It doesn't function as well. But I always question like how much you get out of it. And Plummer had said in the moment, he's like, yeah, but you're always trying harder with one side than the other, right? Are you ever actually trying equally? And I fully agree. Like, I think that is, even if it's 51-49, you're always putting a little bit more energy into one side than the other. But this last week, not knowing what I wanted to play in my showdown event, I decided to play my 2 list concepts against each other just as a way to like kind of break the tie, right? And so I played Asajj and Dooku versus Han and Kanan, and I was super frustrated with like trying to figure out what to do into Han and like how much problems he was causing for the separatist side. And that was my first game ever with Han or against Han, and I found it really interesting. And as soon as I played some other games with Han where I was just piloting him and not playing against him, I started questioning exactly how much he was doing. And that's when it hit me that Han is kind of like, if you played MCP, he's kind of like Loki, where when you play with him, you're like, I'm not sure how much this guy did for me. But your opponents are like, fuck him. That was awful. And I kind of feel like it's that way with Han. So my long-winded hot take is that there are going to be some characters that you may actually learn more about them if you're playing them from both sides, where you're playing against them and trying to win with them. And I think Han is 100% one of those characters. And I think the reason why the community soured on him so fast and seemed to kind of just like, oh, Han's going to be meta breaking. And then it was like he comes out and nobody like everybody was like, nah, nobody plays Han. I think that's the reason. I think playing with Han, it's hard to pinpoint what makes him so good. It's when you're playing against him that you're like, fuck this dude. Dizzer, you've been also on the Han train, so I'm curious if you've had similar thoughts.
So I said it last week, and it's very much it's the whole mindset when you're playing Han, and I think he got quickly camped into the revenge camp of he's a revenge character, and then well, his revenge sucks. That's not the best part about his card though. The best part about his card is
Okay, Dizzer, that's not what I'm asking you. I'm asking you if you think it's more important to Shadowbox to learn him.
Oh, I thought you were asking about
or
Han
get an impression.
specifically, or I guess
I am, but I'm talking about
Run several tangents at once.
Yeah.
Okay. I think for me, it's and shadowboxing is a great skill for anything. I don't think it's just Han specific. I think you could take what you said here and apply it to any primary in the game. I think the biggest issue with shadowboxing is what you said, removing the bias. And as soon as you could do that and actually make shadowboxing a tool for you to grow your game, then it's good for anything, not necessarily just Han.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Dizzard's both right and wrong. I seriously, any listener or watcher who's thinking about playing Han, I strongly recommend you play your next game as a Shadowbox. I think you are going to learn more about Han, and that's different than most of the characters in Shatterpoint.
Real quick, Shadowboxing, just to 100% clarify this, is playing against yourself. Just in case there was any error of what it is.
I did mean to say that. Thank you, Diz.
All right, Matt, you had your hand raised.
Who's going first? Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not the,
Matt was first. Yeah.
So I think the biggest inherent problem we were talking about, just to play devil's advocate here, is that Han, I think, I don't ever like saying it has a high skill cap for any primary at this point, but Han has a lot of moving parts, and my concern with shadowboxing Han out of the gate is if you're not comfortable and know everything Han can do and know how to do Han well, shadowboxing won't teach you anything because you're going to be learning you're going to be learning it, experiencing it, playing against it, but not optimized. That makes sense.
What if Han is the only new character for you on the table between both lists?
I wouldn't rely on getting a good other side experience, with air quotes there, of Han in a Shadowbox game without 10 prior games with Han in under my belt. So I think that's the amount of experience you need to be into Han to even consider shadowboxing to try to learn as such a big learning tool as you're describing it.
I disagree.
My first game with Han was a Shadowbox, and that was a blast.
I wanna squash this right here, right now. Okay, I'm gonna put Matt. This is squash you like a bug. Right now, I think what you were saying. Rude. I know, right? My biggest thing about why I'm very much distasteful about what you said is if I'm trying to because you said go Han into me from other people playing him before I play him, right? That's basically what you said.
No, I said I think even if you're going to shadow box yourself with Han, I think you need 10 games in beforehand to understand all the Han mechanics to consider any of your play with Han good enough to be the counter, the mirror side of a shadow box.
Okay, I misheard you. I thought you were saying you got to have him played into him. That's just developing play patterns.
Diz was just looking for a fight. He didn't actually listen to the response.
It's been a rough day.
Matt, we've already learned. He's not listening to what we're actually saying. He's just saying what he wants to in response.
Yeah, he heard Matt say devil's advocate, and he's like, ooh, Matt wants a fight. Let's go.
But I think most people are probably not going to play any primary 10 times. Or they maybe only have a couple of primaries in the whole game that they're going to play 10 or more times.
10 was a arbitrary number I'm plucking out of the sky. It's more that you can't just unbox, quote unquote, Han and throw him into a shadow box, and very unlikely you're going to get really good quality learning experience out of it.
All right. Well, we'll just have to agree to disagree on that one.
Matt,
Accuser.
Sorry. Yeah, Accuser.
The other one, yeah. All right, so
Phil, I know
slightly different subject, but I've not done shadowboxing myself, and maybe this is for the listener as well. You've mentioned having shadowbox in MCP and War Machine. Do you find that you remove some of the bias in Shatterpoint because of the nature of the draw deck? You can't suboptimally activate something to help yourself. You still have to play the order deck a bit. Do you find that that's helped you remove that bias that Plumber found inherent in the concept?
For me, so one, I never shadowboxed in War Machine. The thought kind of like sounds awful.
Yeah.
I definitely did it with MCP. Shatterpoint, I do think it's easier because you don't have to plan out your entire turn still, right? Because of the order deck, you are still adapting to each situation kind of uniquely. And sure, you've got a little bit of like, oh, who will I reserve, who will I not reserve? But I think you are absolutely correct in that the order deck makes it a little bit easier to shadowbox in Shatterpoint and get meaningful information out of it.
You might have sold me on it. Because that's my biggest concern. Like, am I going to pull my punches on the list I want to win? And that removes some
You
of that
still
quality.
probably will, but you can at least
No.
get some out of it. It's not.
Yeah.
There's weird situations where I think shadowboxing can like absorb more information faster. Like errata dropped in MCP, and I was like, I want to play like 17 different characters right now. Let me play 2 teams that are both things that I want to learn at the same time and absorb some information faster, which helped. But yeah, I mean, it's still just better to play games against people, right? Like that's best case. But when you just have an evening to fuck around and you want to learn something, it's not a bad idea.
That's my question.
Well, Dizzard, I guess that's your drinky drink and lukewarm take.
Sour Monkey, easy peasy. And hot take, I completely forgot because we were.
You were just looking to fight. That was your heat.
That was my heat. Honestly, though, like, hot take. If you ever have a chance to play Kevin the Emperor, absolutely do it because he's a joy
Sith
to
Emperor
play.
Kevin.
I get reminded every single time that we play locally because you hand out those little coins, and those things are so cool. We use them to like mark the objectives.
Wait, what? Tell me about. I want to know about the coin.
Oh my, they're so cool.
Is he local?
No, no, he's in Chicago. But it's basically an Imperial credit that is a coin that he had made, and he was giving them out to his opponents at Nova. They're really cool.
Dope.
I use it to mark.
Kevin's kind of the best.
Yeah, Kevin's amazing. I love Kevin. So that's the hot take. Kevin's great. If you ever see him and you're playing Shatterpoint, try to play a game with Kevin. There's the hot take.
Your take is cold, but Kevin is hot.
Fair enough. Oh, we got a hot take in the chat here from Qui-Gon Din. My hot take: Lobot is better outside of the Lando primary than with him. That actually is kind of a hot take.
Interesting.
I'm with him on. I'm with him on this.
No,
one.
we were talking with him earlier in the chat, like on Discord. I think he's onto something there, and I'm interested to play around with the concept more.
I think if you can have like 2 great like scoundrel primaries and such, like that's have a little more active turn as opposed to utility turn. Yeah, I think I am agreeing with Din on this one. And it's not
Next
just
TTS game, I'm trying him.
Yeah, nice.
Alrighty, so let's go ahead and move on to what you've been up to. I guess for me, I'll go first on this one. I was playing Han Luke, and then I played nothing but Thrawn this last week. I'm sorry. So that's been me. Yeah. Omnus, what you been up to?
Pretty cool weekend for me actually. So I had a showdown event locally, which was at Nomads, which is a game store I had not been to before. It's a little difficult for me to get to, but very cool store with some like went to breakfast around it and had great pizza near it. So very cool location. But we did a 3-round showdown event, and I brought Han and Kanan, and because I've my only game with Han was my shadow box. That is the only experience I had with Han going into this. Never played against him except against myself. First round I get the bye, but the TOs at least feeling like a game at the moment. So we do a game. He dropped Vader 2 Gideon, but he'd never played into Kanan. I don't think he'd played into Han, and he'd never played Never Tell Me the Odds. This game did not go particularly well for him. Rebels and Scoundrels did Rebels and Scoundrels stuff. Nothing too crazy to get into there. So I'm in the winners bracket and play against Jake, which is actually someone I know from the War Machine community, but we had never played before. And he's playing Kanan and Princess Leia Charming to the Last. And I'm like, so you're just basically playing the better version of my list. Great. He wins priority. Kanan, we play on sabotage. Kanan comes forward and one-shots my Rebel Commandos. First activation of the game. I'm like, this is going awful. But somehow with like Hans giving an advance to Ezra and the revenge trigger making it so Kanan ends up threatening a point right in front of his deployment, and I do this cool move with Chopper where I'm like, wait a minute, is Chopper just kind of screwed because I have to sit him out in the open? And then I realized that the objective was close enough to one of those one of the little rectangular terrain pieces that comes in the core set, where I could stand him behind it and contest the spot because it was on the ground. And I was like, dope. So now you can't see Chopper, and I'm contesting an objective, which caused him all sorts of issues because then it meant like Leia can't just advance, shoot Chopper off the point. She can't see him unless he found a way to get like an angle. So like it changed the dynamics of the fight in a good way for me. He also admitted that he thinks that he got a little like seeing red, right? He gets that early wound. I don't have as good of revenge triggers as he does, but we had this crazy activation where his Kanan force pushes my Ezra off a point. Then his Kanan shoots my Kanan to he was the only one contesting this other point that already had one of his guys on it. He wounds my Kanan. So revenge trigger, my Kanan moves up, shoots his Kanan, takes his Kanan down to 1 because I had like 4 or 5 damage on him. And then Han's right there. And so Han shoots him, wounds Kanan during his own activation, and everyone around Kanan is dead already. So his revenge trigger doesn't do anything. I'm like, do you want a revenge trigger my dead Han and my dead Kanan? Guess not. And Princess Leia's on the other side of the board contesting like an important point. She couldn't even get into range if it mattered. And then I held that point, which was a double scoring point because I was holding it that turn, and now there was no one alive on it. He was like, fuck, that was the double score. And he had forgot, like, because the force push was so long ago. I'm like, no, I'm still holding this point. You got no one alive on it. And he's like, damn. That was just like a really crazy activation, but nuts game. Then I'm like, okay, guess I'm playing against Iden and Thrawn in the final, like what I consider probably the best pairing in the game. Starts off with him going Iden and then Shatterpoint. And so his first 2 activations were wounding my stuff. And he was like 2 different turns. He was 1 away from winning the first struggle. And then somehow I swung it back slowly where he just kind of ran out of force. And I was able to pressure points better. And I like swung that first struggle back. And yeah, it's a very weird game. It's 2 games back to back where I have not had games where like struggle 1, 2, and 3 were all close and all could have gone both directions. So it was super interesting. I ended up taking first. There was another 3-0 person. Big shout out to Donovan, who he got the pair down, or he was the pair down, and so he could have beaten. So I would have been the only undefeated, but apparently he threw that game just so that I couldn't be the only undefeated. So thank you, Donovan. But it was interesting. Like I beat some tough lists with good players with Han. And so that was where my hot take came from. Cause the whole time I'm like, is Han really doing that much? Is Han that good? But I'm like, I'm beating these strong lists that are even getting like good draws and good rolls. And somehow like Han was just part of the mixture that was like coming through for me. And so it was weird to dissect him. But yeah, but just learned a lot, and Han surprised me. So
Okay. Matt, what you been playing or doing things?
So I also had a standard showdown event at a local this weekend that I was
showdown.
running. Yeah, this was the first time at this store. Grant, they're a giant store. They're one of the biggest in the areas, but first time doing Shatterpoint there. They decide they want to do a standard event. I'm never a fan of standard. I always would rather do Premiere. I think that's the sweet spot for the game.
Yeah.
But I decided to give Republic a run back after last weekend. A lot of the guys in the community who I know play Republic and are a little down on them. And also, like, one of the other local guys to me, as we've talked about, is Scott Evil Houdini. So we both kind of agree, like, well, we're not going to bring Empire. We're not going to bring Kanan. Like, we're not going to bring the big dumb list to a local because it's not fun. I did get my sweet revenge for Nova round 1. I got paired against Scott and was able to beat him. But I was the 3-0 at the end of the event. And like I said in the hot takes, I did not miss Wrecker at all. Just not in the slightest. So Crosshair and Rex were fantastic. The only reason I didn't run Wolf is I don't have a painted Wolf because it's sitting with the guy who's painting stuff for me. And it was late enough in the waves of me having to rebuy stuff that I had painted that I didn't actually have my own painted Wolf either. So that's the only reason I didn't run Wolf. But we have an event this coming Saturday, and I'm planning on running a Hunter anchor list and to get Wolf in. So
All right.
I want to bounce something that Matt said that I meant to say in mine, that because it was a showdown event and because of our discussion with Aubrey, I was thinking, I just because it's showdown, there might be some more casual people coming. And so that was part of why I leaned on playing Han as opposed to just like, what's the best list that I can bring for this? I didn't know that playing Kanan automatically meant that I was
Yeah,
doing
what
the
was that?
Kanan just felt like almost the only primary that I felt like kind of worked with Han to like get all of the synergies that I wanted, because I'm like Spectre, like, yeah, it was more conversation than what's necessary here at the moment. But I was trying to bring something weird, and then I played against only top tier lists and like very good players. So I was like, you never know with showdown, right? Like you get you kind of get what you get.
All right. Accuser.
I actually got like 4 games this week, so
Ooh.
that was I didn't have an event, just got 4 games between
Digital fist
TTS
bump.
and a couple in persons. Yeah. So I played with a couple of the local guys. So yeah, that's Nate, John, and Connor, who all played at the GT a couple weekends ago. Nate, and then I played Sarah Cruel on Friday, and I played Connor today, and all of them were Mando, Charming Leia, and I'm having a blast with that list. It is. I'm having a lot of fun with it. I'm shocked to find I'm finding Sabine to be kind of the weak spot in that list, where I'm just not getting enough out of her. And that's where the whole Lobot thing was coming into the chat, where like Mando, Lobot, Lando, Bartu, like that sounds pretty sweet. And like the way it works with Leia, Leia can pay a force to get her dash or recover, but dash to Lobot, get the free focus to dash again off of her crack shot, and like you still have 2 actions to hunker shoot because you're probably around a Luke bubble. That's gonna be nuts, and I cannot wait to try that out. But yeah, I mean, Mando, like his attacks, like shocking how much he whiffs, but he's still like a game-changing unit when between Clan of Two and some of the other stuff that he brings, and deflect is always kind of nice on something rolling 6 dice with that expertise. So I keep finding myself surprised by that list. And then John, I broke character and I played Thrawn Moff Gideon for the first time. So yeah, like I might be a blue man group now, guys. Like that was like a whole that was a whole different experience for me. It plays so differently from other stuff that I play. Like I think I didn't focus on wounding till like maybe late second, early third struggle, and just moved around the board stupid fast and broke ties and abused all the movement that list provides, and that was like a whole like unlocking wheels for me. So but yeah, 4 really quality games. I really enjoyed most of what I was bringing. Very upset that Sabine feels like the weak spot in that particular list, but she needs more Spectres, I think. Mando's just not enough to bounce off of, and throwing 6 dice is just tragic with her.
I'm playing Rebels and Accusers is playing Empire. What the fuck is going on with our podcast?
I'm still
guys?
mostly playing Rebels, although I
He's
mean,
playing Empire.
Yeah, on paper, like Mando's like pretty scoundrelly, and if I
Yeah.
lose Sabine, it's a little less rebel cred. But
I
I
don't
don't
understand.
know.
Like, my Sabine is consistently disappointing, and I don't understand why. Like, there's nothing on her card that's bad, and I
No,
don't understand why she seems to underperform every game for me.
I wonder if it's like her expertise maybe just doesn't feel like it's hitting enough,
I
maybe. But I'm not getting enough specters to like be able to set up that the focus bubble. Like I just don't. Mando's not enough, and then they always end up split up, and then Sabine can't get her free focus, which means she's brought pea shooters to a
yeah.
gunfight, and it's not. She can't deliver. I love the out of activation movement though, so I'm actually thinking about slotting her back in over Callus just to kind of take that first spin. I still love Callus, but I think the out of activation movement, I'm kind of gonna experiment and see if that fits with over what Callus is doing. But I mean, Callus doesn't let me down. Callus is
I
always
want to.
showing up and doing
Callus is
stuff.
going to get painted soon too, both him and Zeb. But I am proud of myself. I remembered that when I give her a dash, that she could jump. I finally remembered.
That's
That's
important.
like the coolest part of her kit, but I think that's the part where like it's a really cool mobility thing, but the fact she doesn't have like the mobility other Mandalorian pieces have, like she's nowhere near Bo-Katan. She doesn't have a way to move herself. So she's very much a team player, but if you don't have that team around her, and maybe I change my tune when the armor box drops and it's like Mando, Sabine, 4 cost of choice, and a bunch of Mandalorians. Maybe that changes
Maybe,
it,
yeah.
or slotting her. I've also thought about like the Mando Kanan thing, but yeah, we're gonna try
Who
Lobot
hasn't?
next because that seems dope.
Bot to the low.
All right.
Yeah.
I just want to say I got a message from Accuser the other night, and it said, "I'm doing it. I'm trying Thrawn out." And then it was like an hour later. It's like I have been playing on hard mode. Like I was just like, oh.
I did say that. Yeah.
Uh,
Thrawn's just like running circles, like mentally, physically, like he's like, yeah.
It's
And I
fun.
don't think even the draw was like optimal. Like I've been slapped around by optimal draw of Thrawn, and that sucks. And it still was like, wow, I do feel like I studied the art before I showed up here and was able to read this.
Dizzard, can I ask you a Thrawn question before we move on?
Sure.
So in my game 3, as I was winning struggle 1, I
Mhm.
elected with my last activation, I had intentionally left Iden at 1 instead of wounding her. I actually forego it. Not only did I like skip a spot on the tree to keep her alive, but I then didn't activate, like I didn't shoot anyone with my other rebel commando because she was the only one in range. I left her at 1 and then killed her with my last activation of struggle 1 because I was like, well, if you're going to refresh now, the problem was if I killed her when I was going to kill her, it was like, oh, you get 4 force back and the only cards you've used are Shatterpoint and Iden. This seems bad. But so then it's a few activations later, he has ISF and or I think no, it was like Dark Troopers and the Stormtrooper Sergeant and 2 battle tactics left in his, and he had no force. And I'm like, I'm gonna wound Iden now. We're switching struggles, so if I lose struggle 2, no big deal. I'm like, this seems like the time I'm gonna take away your 2 battle tactics essentially, and that can potentially be a huge advantage going into the beginning of a struggle. And then he decides not to refresh his deck.
Mhm.
No force, 2 cards, 2 battle tactics left. Do you think that's the right call, or like what's your opinion on that call?
I think, especially so. Sarah Cool and I played a game this last week, and I made the mistake of redoing my deck in almost an ideal, like almost the exact same situation. I had Shatterpoint, and I forgot who the other person was, and then 2 battle tactics, and that's what was left in my deck. And we both came to the conclusion that I should have just it's Veers, and 2 battle tactics and Shatterpoint, and we were like, I should not have refreshed. I missed out on so much potential.
How much force did you have left?
None. It didn't matter. Like the battle tactics changed Thrawn, like changed the game so much that you're getting that access to get people back on points without having to use any actions or activations even. So it's like, I think if battle tactics are in the deck, that's when you don't want to be wounding people, because the biggest lure to like refresh your deck as Thrawn is to get your battle tactics back. and your Shatterpoint back. Shatterpoint and your battle tactics. If you have Shatterpoint and battle tactics already used, you're probably refreshing the deck. If they're still in the deck, you're probably not refreshing because you'd rather just hold it out and just play for the long game instead of I need force, because the force is the greedy play.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I think in the game, my gut says that it was a mistake for him to not refresh in the moment. But it's hard to say because the battle tactics are so good, right?
Yeah.
But anyway,
Yeah.
good Thrawn chat. What we
Yeah, and I
what
mean,
Gizzard
it was
loves.
just such a game changer game for me because it was the first time because he was running Mando and he ran the armorer box. And first of all, Paz Vizsla, like you feed dark troopers to a wood chipper. That was nuts. His expertise is insane. But the covert Mandalorians were also pretty impressive, so I was excited to see those. And I had a really cool Moff Gideon moment where I dove him on the point with the two covert Mandos, and Darksabered the one of them in like full treed, and pulled my punches to just do the first step on his tree, 1 damage, 1 shove. Knock him off the point, and they're on 1 hit point, and he's like, oh, that wound, so I could trigger Mando. I was like, no, you still have protection. You are in the deck, so I do no damage and just shove you once. And now Moff Gideon owns this point, and I still haven't wounded anything. It was like the first time where it's like, I full treat and deliberately just did 1 damage just to hold this point. It was like, it was another like game-changing gear spinning moment. So I'll be playing more Thrawn Gideon to experiment with it. I actually took the models out and put them in my bag today as like, I might try this again.
Nice.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and move on to a new segment of the show. This is going to be real quick and dirty real quick, but we want to highlight a list across the community, and this is something we want to start focusing on. Matt, you have the list we're highlighting this week. Do you want to go ahead and shout it out real quick, who it is and what the list is, and a highlight of why you picked it? Just real quick and dirty.
Yeah, so
I've got. Wait a sec. Can I give you one thing real quick?
Yeah.
I got a potential name for this segment.
Okay, good. Go
I'm
ahead.
pissed I didn't come up with this list.
Fair enough.
Well, and that works very well for this one. So yeah, obviously, like Desert said, part of the goal of this is to highlight lists that are outside of those meta ones that we all talk about, and somebody who did well with something off the cuff. So from the Canadian GT, I know we talked about this a little bit, but I want to highlight the person who came in 5th, Titus Kozlov. So he came in 5th. He missed the top cut. It was top 4 cut. He missed it because he had 1 less wound than the person who came in 4th. Damn. He ran
I feel you, Titus. I feel you.
Right. He ran a Cad Bane anchor list. And okay, fine. Like, you think to yourself, that's fine. Cad can anchor. His Cad anchor so it's Cad Bane, Django, Bounty Hunters, his anchor.
Yeah.
He runs with it the Mandalorian box as is, the Ahsoka Tano, Bo-Katan, Clan Kryze, so basically
the Ahsoka
box, right? Thank you, as is, and then the Queen Padme Amidala box as is. And he his only loss on the day was to Iceman Dean, who came in 2nd at the event overall and is a fantastic player. So I was really impressed with just seeing a Cad anchor list in general, but especially the combinations.
Yeah, you don't see Cad Padme, I think, ever. Like, are we calling it Cadme? Are we gonna just agree to do that? No, but like, I love that, like, because we talk a lot about like Iden Thrawn and all these big meta threats, but like people are placing pretty well in big events with like boxes straight up, or something that like Padme I don't think's in the conversation much as like a top tier, but you can do it, right? If you put the reps in and find something that works for you and play the hell out of it. Like,
I bought Padme
do
with
it.
my winnings from the event, for the record.
That's exciting. I think Sabe is like underappreciated just generally. She seems like a very good secondary that people should be looking at more.
And just so before they come after us with copyright lawyers, we do not have the right to "You Can Do It, Put Your Back Into It" by Ice Cube, because that was what Accuser was absolutely implying. But no, we do not have the rights.
I don't understand that reference.
There's a song, "You Can Do It, Put Your Back Into It," Ice Cube.
I'll take your word for it. That is,
All right.
You could do it.
I know who Ice Cube is, and that's about where that ends.
All right, fair enough.
He's in 21 Jump Street.
I'm just amazed.
Oh,
That
yeah,
the thing
exactly.
that will
It's a great
probably
movie.
hurt me the most in this podcast now came from Accuser and not Dizzard. Like,
So-
and that surprises me so much.
Fun fact you guys need to know about me, like I love going to bar trivia with my friends, and we like before we had Theo, like we were there like every few weeks with a couple of other couples, right? The music is my weak spot. That is my absolute blind spot. You can hit me on pop culture, geography, current events, a little bit of sports. Music's my blind spot. Do not ask me music questions. I cannot tell you the name of an artist, an album, year. I'll recognize the tune, and that's about it. So
What is Fleetwood Mac's lead singer's name?
it's either Fleetwood or Mac, probably.
Wow. All right, that's all evidence I needed. All right. God. Wow.
I'm sorry that
So-
Dizzard thought we cared about Fleetwood Mac on this show. So
Wow.
I know
Oh
they've got
my
like a song on
God.
Guardians of the Galaxy, and like that's about where my knowledge ends.
Oh my
goodness.
God.
Okay, so to
Anyways.
close off our I wish I had thought of that list section.
I'm
Titus,
pissed I didn't come up with that list.
there you go. I'm pissed I didn't come up with that list. Titus, great job. Cat
Yeah.
Anchor going 3-1, missing a cup, but way to go.
Shout out to Titus. Way to be
That's
creative,
super
man.
cool, yeah.
We want to highlight that stuff. You did something special. Fuck yeah.
Play what you love, guys.
All right, we're going to go ahead and move on to the main topic of the week after finding out the show is a bunch of Fleetwood Mac haters. Matt, do you want to go ahead and
Don't hate
introduce
him,
the
just don't
topic?
know the lead singer's name.
I do love Stevie Nicks, but so
Thank you.
Is that the lead singer? It was Stevie
yes.
Nicks. I've
Yes.
heard of her.
that was his. That's why he was extra upset. So
Stevie Nicks, isn't that a basketball team?
Wow.
It's the blind piano player.
All right,
I'm
we're gonna
just
start-
kidding. That's Stevie
let's-
Wonder.
Let's go ahead and get on the terrain here. We've
I've heard Dizzard too much. Continue.
Wow.
all right, so
Hey, Accuser, that's not possible. Don't say that in a sentence.
if you guys are in the Discord, we have a whole channel dedicated to terrain talk because I have an unhealthy obsession with plastic buildings. But I've learned I have a lot of friends who also have unhealthy obsessions with plastic buildings. So
There are dozens of us.
You
So-
make me feel like I have a healthy obsession.
I'm here. That's the level
Yeah.
of support I bring to this podcast. So,
Terrain therapy.
so we're gonna talk about terrain a little bit today, and this is the idea of this is we want this to be things for you to think about as you're working on your home board, as you're working on terrain for events, for your local store, for something really big. And I want to kind of preface all this with we're going to try to mostly talk about the core box terrain and the AMG terrain because it's what you know, it's what you can relate with. We're probably going to mention a few other companies that offer STLs to print for terrain. The biggest one that I use especially is Imperial Terrain. So just to give you guys listening at home some context of what we're trying to use as reference points. So I think the best way to tackle this a little bit is talk about when you're planning for a table. I think there's 5 categories to think about. And let me just go through the categories real quick and see if you guys think there's any more we need to talk about. And then we can go through them one by one. So the biggest thing these are in no particular order, are ladders, gantries, the density of terrain. I always think about difficult to play areas, and we'll highlight that a little bit more, and then scatter terrain. Is there anything else you guys can think of in terms of the features or the types of things you should think about for Shatterpoint terrain? At a
Amount
more
of
broad
elevated,
level?
amount of elevated terrain.
Yeah, I think
is key there.
That's good.
I think that's a good call because I think a lot of war gamers, no matter what system you're coming from, terrain's largely part of it. And we think about terrain density, but there's not many game systems where you think about terrain verticality. And I think that's worth talking about too.
Terrain vertical. Nice. That phrase.
Got you, dude.
That just it touches me in the right places.
That sounds like a Fleetwood Mac lyric. Anyways, Go on, Matt.
Which one?
So let's
Touching on the right places.
Which song is that, Dizzard? If that's in a song, which one is it? And I will listen to that song.
I'm just jerking.
He's
yeah, that's what
riffing.
I thought. Fleetwood Mac hater. Go ahead, Matt.
Wow.
So let's start. I think the best way to start this is, besides at the very beginning, is let's start with density. So everyone knows what comes in the core box, right? Like how much terrain. My general opinion, when someone asks me, "Hey, how much terrain do I want on the board?" The nice thing is, and again, this comes to that difference of playing at home versus playing at like a convention or an event. I like a little diversity. I like my boards at home to be able to have a couple extra pieces so I can take stuff off, put stuff on. Generally, I always say what I want to start with density wise is I want to start with the 3 AMG, well, really now the 4 AMG TerRains kits, right? The core box, the high ground, the garage or the mechanics bay, and I can't for the life of me remember the other one.
Take
like a
cover is the fourth
scatter.
one.
Take cover, yeah.
Take cover.
It's got a
So,
building and a
Most
bunch of scatter type
skippable
terrain. Yeah.
purchase from AMG.
Yeah. So I think if you take those 4 different kits, that is a good starting point for density in my mind.
That's fair.
So let's start
I
with
love
just talking about density for everyone. Leave us a little bit more open because I saw a lot of head nods. Is anyone thinking there needs to be less terrain on a table than that?
Nope.
No, I think like Shatterpoint is a game where I think you're actually rewarded for like more terrain than your normal system, just even density wise. Like
So
I'm a big fan of more terrain personally, and that's most systems, but Shatterpoint especially.
I agree with you, Accuser. I will say, because I've been playing so many games where I like set up the terrain knowing the crisis, playing in the tournament and like going back to like, oh, because like I'm trying to cover every single, of the struggles, right? Even using the new iWargame mats where like I know where they are, like there's still gonna be big gaps. And I found it very refreshing to like have some spots that are on the ground. Like I always have some
Oh, yeah.
spots, but I felt like there was just a little bit more. And like as I was adding more terrain, I was covering up one more or two more. And I don't know, it like I do think there's a point where you can absolutely cover too many objectives. So you should think about that where in like shifting priorities, I'm at the point where I definitely want to leave at least 3 available and not go down to, or sorry, leave 3 on the bottom elevation at minimum, and then maybe you do more. I don't know what it would be for sabotage because you only have 8 spots.
7.
Or wait, yeah, you have 7.
7.
Yeah. What the percentage that's right for sabotage, I don't know, but I want at least 3, and I'm thinking I should probably play more games with 4 on the ground. Diz?
I think the issue you have with sabotage, where I see a lot of boards, is I think sabotage, like where the placement is going to be, kind of gets forgotten about, and you end up with like 3 points in a row all on the same elevation. So I think it's more about less of how many there are, but like how, I guess, synchronous it is on the elevation from point to point to point. So you want like the variation to be more between the point to the next point. They're so close together. Having the elevation difference be spread out more across those points
Yeah.
would help out
That's
that
a
game
really
a whole
good
lot.
That's a really good shout, and I'm surprised that came from Dizzard.
Wow, you're
I'm gonna-
rough tonight.
No, but I'm going to back up with a Dizzard here because I think it goes not just the density but the verticality of it, right? Like you can have objectives on the ground, that's cool, but if they're all like on the same terrain level, if it's ground or level 1, I think that's a lot less interesting because at that point you can just run across gantries, hop across buildings. You want to find ways to leverage the terrain elevation. You can get to high ground, gets you to level 2 pretty comfortably, and you can build some of those towers up. I've got one that's like 3 levels. You can get verticality out of even the core box and your high ground pack, so leverage that. Like I've usually got 1 on level 2, 1 ground, 1 like they're kind of like you've got to jump and leverage your climbs and your jumps and elevation and ingress to play it.
I do want to hammer what Diz said. I think there's a really important difference that maybe is something I haven't been paying attention to enough when I'm setting up tables, is to make sure that there is elevation difference between the objectives that are closest together, and make
Mhm.
sure there is more of that where there's the the double level and then on the ground and then single level, and like make sure that that is varied too. That was not something I had even considered necessarily, outside of like, let's not have the whole middle be the second elevation, right? Like obviously I've thought about that, but yeah, that variety I think is important, something I'm going to try to think about more.
Yeah, and I think the best way to do it is that tower and high ground. If you get that somewhere on like one of the objectives on the center line, you're introducing elevation variance just immediately. I think that's like probably out of. I'm gonna asterisk the garage because I think the garage is actually a really cool terrain piece, and I'm sure we'll get to it. But the high ground tower, I think, is like one of the best terrain pieces in the game,
Yeah.
just because it introduces so much variance, and the split. It's got ingress points built into it, but they're split, right? You can't just immediately hop to second level, so it introduces interesting tactical decisions while being able to play like multiple elevations depending on your table.
So you guys got a little bit ahead of me because
Sorry.
no. But so
We're all excited about it.
Exactly right. I didn't. Like rule number one is don't interrupt good conversation, because setting up tables and like where to put objectives and stuff is like was our part two of this kind of mentally. So, but I think you guys made a ton of good points. I love it. So we talked about density. I think we're all kind of in agreement on an amount that really
We kind of talked about
brings the
elevation
game.
too, right? Like we
Yeah,
probably
yeah.
don't need that. Does anyone
Extra
have something that would
category.
be like more for the elevation category, or did we just kind of cover it? I feel like we kind of covered
No, I
it.
think we did. Yeah, that's why I let you guys just run
Yeah.
with it. So
Yeah.
the next one, I think this like gantries is a really, I think it's gonna be a pretty simple conversation. So by gantries, I really mean, are we trying to connect? You know, obviously we want. Does every building need to be connected to another building via a gantry? Do we need a ton of gantries? One of the things that I see a lot and people talk about, let's say you have two towers that are equidistant apart. They have, each one has two additional levels, so they're 3 levels. Do you run a gantry at each level? So in theory, if you're looking top down, all the gantries are perfectly in line. I don't. I like actually like removing one of them and making it a little more interesting. But
When I first started setting up tables and playing the game, I looked at like every like possible place you could put a gantry and put it there. And as I've like evolved and started playing more, it's like, no, the cool thing is that you can, mix it up between games and you don't have to use the terrain the same way twice. But yeah, I mean, if I have like 2 high ground towers, like I've got a gantry maybe at one level. It makes it much more interesting, and like you can move from, if they're close enough and a move covers it, like you can jump that gap with an advance. But yeah, I don't think you need one at every level. Where I do think it gets interesting is if you have another gantry under it running perpendicular to it, and then
Those
you've
are
got
so
like,
fun when you
I love those
right?
because it's so Star
Yeah.
Wars. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, gantries basically the reason I want to highlight this still as a topic is like it's a big part of the game, the being having an open area underneath to shoot and move. Is there any other thoughts you guys have on gantries? I think we're going to get into bigger
I
conversations about
definitely
the
have some
lat.
gantry thoughts that are not
Okay.
direct to your question. First thing is, when you're assembling gantries, if you have not done them yet, I think one of the biggest mistakes that you could make is do all of them even.
agreed.
I find, so when you're assembling gantries, right, you have 2 edges and then you have 2 middle pieces is what you get kind of per gantry. The most important length that I think for gantries is actually edge 1 edge is
Those
a
are good.
really
Mhm.
important short length, and I don't think enough people make that, and it's so useful for getting things at the right distances that kind of like allow
You get
you
some
to,
weird ones. You need the short guys. The
yeah, you
short
need the
gantries are
short ones.
great.
I would say make more of the short one than anything else, and then have about even of the 2 pieces in the middle and 3 pieces in the middle, and then
Yeah.
have like a 1 or 2 like longer ones.
Yeah, I think I've got
The
3 of the
short ones,
yeah. I've got 3 of the short ones. I think 3 or 4 of the 2 pieces, 2 or 3 of the 3s, and then 1 like super long 4-1. And
yeah.
I wouldn't go longer than 4. They start to get a little wobbly.
Yeah, you'd have to do braces, like
Yeah,
put some
I
extra
brace
pieces.
mine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think seriously, the short one that's only got 1 piece in the middle, I would have
It's
at
great.
least 4 of those available per table. they're so helpful for distances, and when you're like, oh, I just need this piece to go just far enough that it doesn't just like completely fuck up the the deployment or something, but covers these other objectives. It's a super useful piece.
Um, Dizzard, anything to add on for gantries before we move on?
Not only length but width. I think because you sent me home with the printed gantries, and those are a lot skinnier than the ones that come from like the core set. And I actually think it's like really cool to have different width of gantries across the game, and just like different width of platforms. And I saw somebody talking about in one of the other discords somewhere about how landing spaces and how important it is to make sure that there's no space to stand in certain spots. And I think having situations on a board where you can fit like two models there, so you're not just completely blocking somebody off of contesting, but like creating interesting placement decisions where you can only fit two. I think having the narrowness and wideness of certain things vary like gantries is really, really cool to add to the game. And I think that it needs to be explored more. And I hope AMG makes
I wish
skinny
the
gantries.
terrain places would make wider gantries. Like I feel like every gantry that is a 3D print is less wide than the AMG ones, and I wish there was wider ones.
I
Yeah,
just
both
scale
ways.
mine. I have
I-
a couple that are like wide that like could fit 3 to 4 50 mil models in a row, and I have a couple of those printed, but I just take the file and just expand the access.
I think it just goes both
Nice.
ways. Like make it wider, make it skinnier. Just have like that variety of width as well as length. Like just create that variety, creates decisions in the game. Because I think terrain dictates so much decision making in the game.
I don't really
Yes.
get too far with that thought because that comes
Okay.
up under one of our well, it comes up under like difficult to play areas in my mind and then we'll talk about that in a second. So ladders.
Can I ask one?
Yep,
Well,
go
before we
ahead.
move on to ladders, one more question for the group. And Matt, if this is something that's better later on, just tell me. Do you guys think there should be 3D printed gantries that the larger base can't stand on at all?
That goes under difficult to play, which is after ladders for us.
Okay.
So I'm
Then
gonna
we
put
can-
a pin in that one.
Sure.
Pin it,
Pin.
because I think that's
It's
going to be a
pin.
controversial topic.
So
Nice. Okay.
ladders. So I'm gonna not give my thoughts. I'm gonna pass this off, and I'm gonna start with you on this because you and I were involved in that really long initial conversation in the terrain chart in the
Yeah.
Discord. Yeah, the like 300 messages in 25-minute conversation. So
I think ladders are probably the most hot topic when it comes to terrain, right? Like I don't think that's even a hot take.
So, Omnus, I want to hear from you because you're like the perfect other end of the spectrum, like you and Dizzard to kind of where I'm at, where you guys really just have tables built for your home. And then I know like Accuser, you've worked with some like helped out for some events. You're kind of in that middle area. So I'm going to start with you, Omnus, and then we're going to go to Dizzard. So Omnus, thoughts on volume? So let's start with volume of ladders.
Volume of ladders.
Loud.
What?
Sorry, go on.
I don't even understand. Loud? That I don't understand how that was a comment.
Volume loud.
Oh,
Like that was
okay,
low hanging
wow.
fruit for a pun
No,
today.
I totally missed that. Okay, nicely done.
I turned it up to 11.
I'm at a weird point where I'm not sure I've ever played on a table that purely from a volume perspective that I've ever felt like there was a wrong amount of ladders. I played on tables like at the GT where there wasn't very many, and I still found it very interesting. And then I've learned that apparently my tables now are on the highest end of the amount of ladders, and I still find them very interesting. And all my opponents seem to be giving me positive feedback. I brought them to the tournament yesterday. People loved playing on my tables. The thing that I would say is it's the placement of the ladders that the only time that I've played on a table and been like annoyed is when you set up all the terrain, you set up the objectives, and then the ladders are placed in the utmost convenient spots for getting to objectives all over the place. That's the only thing that I actively really dislike. I think almost any amount of ladders is actually interesting.
All right. Dizzard, your ladder thoughts.
My ladder thoughts. There was a point in time where I thought fewer ladders was better because they just made the game too easy. I remember talking about that and being chastised for it. Nowadays, I definitely think that it's less about the amount of ladders and where the ladders are is what matters most, to echo what Alma said. And it's very much paying attention to where the points are going to drop as like this person setting up the table. Like even measure out a couple points to make sure that a ladder isn't going to directly put you on a point every time there's a ladder, because that makes it way too easy. It makes it like I don't even have to think. I'm just going to move here and get everything I need. It's wonderful. I don't know what the magic ratio is. I definitely think that they're important. I think that they do stuff for the game that's really cool.
Ingress
But
points are important. Dizzard quoted.
quote unquote, you were salty against me tonight, and I don't like it.
That's the hottest take I've ever heard.
Wow. And then I definitely think that it's. I think the biggest thing with ladders that I have is like talking about with your opponent, because there's still the controversy with ladders as far as like where can you actually get off at, and I think that's probably the biggest thing to talk about with ladders, because I don't even know anymore.
So when you climb a ladder, like if you're out like painting a house, real world,
Have you ever
do
seen
you
a
only
Jedi
go
paint a
straight to the
house?
top and just you have to go straight to the top of the ladder and you can't stop anywhere in the middle and hop off?
Oh, I completely agree. The rule.
It's my thought.
Yeah, it's. I don't know.
Accuser bringing
I like
logic into
ladders.
war games. First
Well,
mistake.
I
Boom.
I think the rules are pretty clear on that one. That yeah, you can get off at any point.
Yeah.
It's what is an ingress point has to be touching it.
That's the thing. Ingress point as well, right? Like some of this is defined. Like I know, like on TTS, they've got some that are like vines that are all the way to the top of a giant platform. There's elevators that I've seen on TTS, and I know you could probably do it real world where that probably has a fixed point you get off. You can't just hop off in the middle if there's not a stop. That's stuff you define. For me, I don't think it's controversial to say you can stop on a ladder midway up a ladder and
I
hop
will
to a
say,
roof.
so at the event that I just went to, because I brought it up in like the opening event talk, I sort of asked about we talked about ingress halfway and whether or not the rails stopped pushes. We talked about it at the beginning, and then we all just kind of agreed let's all play it the same way rather than being varied from game to game. And so everyone was just like, rails don't stop pushes. You can ingress to the first level or the second level on double link ladders. And then we all played it the same way, the same event. And I fucking loved that. Like, okay, now it's not a game by game conversation. It's just like we've all agreed to play it a particular way. Great.
All right, so you give us some of your thoughts, but Accuser, anything else to add in? As somebody who's now taken ladders and
Matt,
had
we
to
need
work...
your thoughts.
No, I want to go. I want to see if Accuser.
He
has
put me in the
anything
middle
else
of the road
officially.
between
Yeah,
you guys
he's
and
in
him.
the middle of
Yeah.
the road, because
Okay.
I might have to take some more like definitive number opinions, because you guys so far I've heard there's no wrong answer, and basically there's a no wrong answer. So I'm gonna have to give people a wrong answer. But so Accuser, go ahead. What are your thoughts?
I'm not sure there's a wrong answer in quantity, at
Yes,
least on the
no
high
wrong
end.
answer.
But no, I'm going to caveat this. There is a wrong answer. One, you can have too few. At my most recent GT, I played on a table that had 5 ladders on the entire board, and 4 of them were on the deployment line. There was 1 ladder for the rest of the table, and there were like elevated positions. Like the entire center of the board, you couldn't even get to it unless you had jetpacks. Like that's not good. You've shut down most lists from being able to play that game in a meaningful way. If you're playing against something that has access to jump more easily, they win. It's on the other side of it, you can have enough, but you can place them in nonsense ways. We had one at the GT where it was a high ground tower and just standalone, and the high ground tower has 2 ingress points built into it. And then they had on the top platform 2 tall ladders, one on either side of the tower going up to the top level. You don't need a total of 4 ingress points on a single high ground tower. You just don't. You can definitely have too many ladders or too few if you place them poorly. Where it starts to get interesting is maybe it's one per building ish, and that's like a not a hard and fast rule. But I also think it gets interesting where like those towers, like those thinner ones in the core set that can be multi-tiered. I have a few that are built with like ladders running up the side that hit both platforms. I have some that are built with the ladders stopping at each level. And so they're distinct ingress points. And that's where I think it starts to get interesting is when ladders are, they're not all faced the same direction. They're not even necessarily faced towards the deployment zones, but are like, 90 degrees, and they all face different directions because I think it makes it more interactive in creative ways. So for me, you can definitely have too few ladders. You can have too many in one spot. The concentration of them can be completely off. And I don't know the right answer mathematically. It's definitely a gut feel thing. But you don't need 4 ladders on a single tower. And
Okay.
that's, but
Here's
like, yeah.
I'll do some numbers too, since Matt wants numbers. He's a data guy.
He's got a
He likes-
spreadsheet, I'm sure, but
Yeah. So I will say a minimum is 1 per piece of terrain per elevation. So ignore gantries, all other pieces of terrain. It doesn't have to be 1 per terrain in setup, but like spread out over the whole table. If you've got a total of 7 pieces of terrain plus their second elevation factored into that, then you could have a minimum of 7 like single elevation ladders spread out. Matt, you had a question?
To clarify that, so like if I have 5 at level 1 and 2 of those 5 have an extra height, is that 7 or is that
Yes.
5 by your math?
I'm saying that's 7.
Okay.
I don't
So-
think that's bad. Yeah.
I like you
I'm
putting
saying
them,
that's for a minimum.
and that so my minimum that I go with is for every footprint piece of terrain, regardless of height. For every footprint piece of terrain, I want to have 1 ladder on the board. That's my bare minimum because I don't mind some tables with thin ladders. And then my maximum I do is for every footprint piece of terrain is 2 ladders is the maximum I do. And I think that even gets a little aggressive. It's probably should be like 1.75, something like that.
I will tell you, my table is actually 2 per piece of terrain. So it would be like if we were using mine where you're also factoring in the double level, also counting as another piece of terrain. Mine is because people kept telling me more ladders, more ladders, more ladders. And so they're all glued on. And everybody seems to like, I've never had anyone complain that there was too many ladders. I don't think I would want to go over this, like, except maybe like 1 or 2 that's connected to gantries. But I think it's fair to say that 2 per piece of terrain per elevation level is actually like a fine maximum. I think going over it gets wonky.
I thinking about the boards that I have now together, I'd probably say 1.5 is probably more like that. But also, I would consider, let's say I have a 3-level tower in the middle. If I have a ladder that goes up from the bottom all the way to the top and gets off in the middle, I would probably consider that 2 ladders because it has 2 different points to get off at. So for my numbers, so I would say probably
Like the high ground tower, right?
yeah, I would say like a 1-to-1 ratio is kind of my minimum, and a 1 to 1.5 is really where I'm looking at a max. Certain tables have different designs. And what I want to talk about, and it's something I've been kind of keeping in my back pocket here. Why? There's a reason I think too many ladders. I think too many ladders is worse than too few ladders. The reason I have found is I think too many ladders gives too big of an advantage to an experienced player over a new player. The most common thing as someone who I've run at this point 15 events, 20 events, I watch a ton of times the players who forget like, oh wait, I could move to the top of the ladder and then ingress that like go down and get that extra little bit of movement, or people who forget that like, wait, I can go down and then move over to another ladder and come back up the other side and get do all their movement out of engagement. Newer players tend to struggle with that more. So in my mind, too many ingress points just let someone who's really good at the chess moves just take over a game.
I think that is an awful take, to be entirely like. I will agree with you. Like, you shouldn't put too many ladders in a demo. Like, you want to make it interesting, but you're concerned about the quality of a table setup for like balance reasons with a new player, like versus an experienced player. That just seems like a weird take to me, Matt.
I'm saying going too many ladders. Like I think that's why it's more. I think it's important to have a minimum and maximum in general.
Yeah.
But I
But
think
you're
the
already saying that like
maximum.
my table is like way above your maximum. So you're saying that like my table is awful for new players to play on.
I don't think it's awful for. I think it's going to give an experienced player a chance to take advantage of a new player. Which,
Isn't the
if you're playing
experienced
at
player...
home, but that's the thing, if you're playing at home, it's less of an issue, right? Because like I'm thinking of this terrain as someone who's taking this for other people to play on.
I
You
take
playing
my
at home,
table. You're acting like I only play my tables at home. I always bring a table to the game store, and I play almost all of my games at a game store with other people.
But like if you're working with somebody else, you can help teach people what to do with all the
Yes.
ingress points. If I'm going to a random tournament and bringing a table that has a crap ton of ladders, I'm going to look at it and go, a more experienced player just has an edge more than they would have
The
already
experienced
had.
player already has the edge. There's
I'm
no
saying
new
even
player.
more. I
Okay.
think movement is probably the most important point of the game. Giving
is.
more ingress points means you're giving more movement resources. So I think letting somebody who excels at movement, like a more experienced player, have more movement resources gives them a greater advantage.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying it's irrelevant. Like you're worried about a new player losing to an experienced player that they're probably losing anyway. Like if a new player is showing up at a tournament and playing against an experienced player, and if the experienced player is actually trying, they're probably winning that game. Unless they like go, oh, we're already both in the losers bracket because I lost to another great player round one. So now we're just going to approach this as a teaching game. I'm just not sure that that's like, I don't want this to come across to listeners like I don't care about the new player experience. Like when I was just doing a game with someone who had only played one game, and we did the first game like, hey, I'm like talking about different potential moves with him every round, and then I asked him after that game like, hey, in this next game, Ram, do you want to just make all the decisions on your own? And he was like, how about I play this next game and I just make decisions and you just call me out if you think I'm doing something really dumb. And like want him to grow as a player. But so I'm not trying to shit on new player experience. But we should probably give Diz and Accuser a chance to jump in here before we just like totally take over this shit.
So anything to add on to my thoughts about ladders before we move on to like difficult to play areas?
Diz wants to talk so bad. Just say it.
Hit me with a Diz.
I
Go.
was enjoying the last, I don't know how long. I've been looking for like fighting sound bites, but I didn't want to like really like disturb anything. So I need to go
into
through
your
and
corners, fighters.
I just need to go download a bunch of sound bites of various things because honestly, like it was very interesting.
Yeah.
I very much feel like I'm on the camp of. I do think an amount of ladders does matter. Don't necessarily. I'm more camp Omnus with this because I don't necessarily think it's going to sway the game one way or the other. I do think that having the advantage of knowledge of what you can do with ladders and being more cognizant of it does weigh in, but that's going to be there regardless of the amount of ladders either way. I don't think the amount of ladders changes that really. It just gives more like opportunities to show, I guess. But I just kind of look at it like it's something to think about, but I don't think it's like the reason for how many ladders you put into a game. I think the reason is really just so that way like you make the game more fair, and that way you don't give somebody like Vader access to be everywhere on the board. And I think that's more the reason why is you have characters that like the fewer the ladders, the less impactful their dashes are. If there's a shit ton of ladders, Thrawn is a menace because he is able to get people anywhere and anywhere, any level because of the amount of ladders. So I think that's more important to the amount of ladders than necessarily player skill level. Accuser.
I don't. If you're going to a big tournament and you've paid for entry, I mean, if you're a newer player, you better learn how to play ladders pretty quick. Is all I'm saying. Like,
dude, ingress points are important.
Yeah, ingress points are important to the game. Show up to a tournament knowing how to use them, because otherwise, yeah, you're gonna get. I mean, you're probably gonna lose that game on raw skill, but
So
yeah, I mean, the ladders I don't think will be the game changer there.
Diz, did you message Pagani and say ingress points are too good?
Yeah, at one point I did.
Yeah.
I did actually message
Oh
him,
my
and
god,
I was,
really?
yeah, no, there was back in the early stages of the game. I messaged him and I said Ingrid's points are way too good, and he replied with they're the way they are for very specific reasons because of the impact it has on the game.
So to kind of move us on from the ladder conversation, I will end
Ladder
with
Because
one
I think we
thing.
could be here all day.
As
Yeah, we should
Dizzard
move
is
on
the-
sooner or later.
No. So the last thought I want to put on this is Dizzard is the only person who has played on somebody else in this chat's table. Dizzard, every single one of the 16 tables I brought to Nova fit into that rule of 1-to-1 or 1 to 1.75 ratio, with the exception of Emperor Kevin's favorite board, the giant platform of doom. You could either call that a 1-to-2 or a 0.5-to-1, depending on how you want to consider it. But
Diz has also played on my table. Diz, did
before you
you
added your 17 ladders,
No,
It was already 2 ladders per piece of terrain. Dizzard, did you feel like that was too many ladders?
At the end of the day,
hesitation.
No pressure, guys.
at the end of the day, right?
This is choose which child you love more.
No, you're.
Which
it doesn't,
beard do you love more, Dizzard? Tell us now.
Okay, like honestly, like
Red-headed stepchild.
I'm gonna give you a
Not even in the running.
typical Dizzard answer here, and I think you're both wrong. It doesn't matter. Like you show up to the table, you evaluate the table, and that goes into your plan. I don't care.
All right. I like that as the end of the ladder conversation. We'll continue this in the Discord. But so we've kind of beaten around the bush on this one a little bit, but it's so I call this without a better title. It's difficult to play areas or areas of note. And the big things I'm talking about are spaces where certain size bases can't fit. Another thing is areas of like interest or like a platform where where like an objective might be that could only fit maybe let's say 1 or maximum 2 models. And then the other thing is, and this is more of a play, it's a little less of a topic to talk about, but I think something people need to think about when they're building their board is having too many crossing gantries is hard to play under, but that's more of a physical hard to play versus a tactical hard to play around.
Whoa,
So
whoa.
What?
I have a really cool tool that I have not touched since I opened the core box that is designed to help me do shoves under gantries.
Hey, fun fact, you can just pick the gantry up and measure under it. Like, you know where they go. They're slotted into terrain.
Whoa. Accuser, you're bringing logic into war games again.
I gotta stop doing that. It's a bad look.
This is a lot of logic for one like rogue support episode. So
Imagine
can you just tone that down a notch?
I can show you. I'll find a picture for that one. So let's start
back on
with
topic.
back on topic. Let's start with the how do you guys feel? And I'm gonna start with Accuser on this one. How do you feel about having points on the table where I'm gonna expand on this a little. So points on the table where a 50 mil base can't go. And if you're okay with it, are you okay with it on a point where there's an objective? Because I think those are 2 key elements to talk about, objectives versus non. So what are your feeling on 50 mil base on spaces where some models can't fit?
If we're just hedging on the 50 mil, because I've got a lot of thoughts on difficult terrain generally here, but as far as 50 mil bases go, I think this goes back to the density versus verticality. The larger base has an inherent advantage in raw speed over open terrain. See General Grievous. He's probably one of the fastest models in the game in a straight line. He has an advantage over flat surface. There's got to be a trade-off for that. I don't mind there being narrower pieces of terrain where that size model, you can't fit 1, let alone 2 of them. I think that's part of the trade-off you bring when you bring droids or Ewoks or General Grievous. With that said, I don't think you want them to be on objectives, or at least no more than like 1, and maybe like one of the weird corner objectives, right? Like not in the center of the table. But generally I like those because it also makes certain models in the game more interesting, right? For every General Grievous that can't stand on a narrow tower, Cad Bane gets a really cool sniper spot where he can't be engaged and gets to do his identity more regularly. So it gives you tactical options there where you're not getting pounced by Grievous or by, you can't get these B2s out of there or something, but it gives you Cad Bane or Hondo, who doesn't like necessarily being in a tar pit either, somewhere near the action, but it's not the objective. And I think that makes the game much more interesting. So I'm very pro, like, put a narrow tower on the board. They're in the core box for a reason with your B1s.
I'm going to jump to Dizzard. Thoughts, agreements, and disagreements to what Accuser said.
I agree. Variety is the spice of life. And if you have the same, and this, honestly, I was going to save this for the end of the show, but I'm going to say it right now, and this goes back to the ladders as well. We can't have a standardization of how much or how big or how small, because that just creates the same table across the board every single time you play a game. So why can't Omnus and you both be right?
Yeah, I'm always right.
And that's the podcast. The most Star Wars thing I can do. I'm just kidding.
All right, so Dizzard with a Dizzard, non-Dizzard answered. Omnus, your thoughts on what Accuser and I guess Dizzard said?
So as much as I
Or
was a
didn't
little
say.
more friendly on the prior ones, this is one where honestly, if there's an objective on it and it's a spot where 50mm can't stand, or you can block the entire landing platform with a single character, I don't like it. None. I don't want any of them. I don't think it's fun at all for, like, even when I'm the person who has a guy on there. I think it's so shitty for my opponent to be like, if you can't shove me off this point, you cannot score it. Period. That's not fun. That's like the worst experience in Shatterpoint, is when, even when you hit that point, right, where you're all clustered on this one spot that's got like a piece of terrain and a gantry, and now there's just no more room to put someone. That doesn't feel good, but it's like you can live with it. We're like, there's 5 guys on the point already. Like, I'm kind of like stuck if I haven't been able to shove someone off at this point. But when there's one and now you cannot score it unless you wound them or shove them off, it's not fun. I don't understand why people like it. If there's a point that's not the same elevation, that's like higher but contesting the point for Cad to stand on, I'm fine with that. But Cad's also like the worst character in Star Wars, so I don't actually give a fuck whether he's good.
Oh my god.
Pong Krell exists and you're going to slander Cad Bane?
Pong Krell
Like,
is so much more interesting than Cad Bane. Fuck
you
off
didn't
if
say
you
interesting.
think,
You
if
said
you
like
think
the worst character. Like
Pong
Krell's
yeah.
a war criminal.
Okay, well, if
So-
you're saying worse from the perspective of morality, that's totally different. Cad's also got bad morals, but Cad's is just a bad character.
But he does it for money. Like, that's its
No,
own
he's a
morality.
bad
Pong
character,
Krell's
and, like,
just a
he is-
monster.
Cad Bane is an uninteresting, poorly designed character.
He's the good, the bad, and the ugly, but in space. Like, that's not bad. That's pure George Lucas. You cannot convince me otherwise.
Before we turn this into a everyone gangs up on Omnus about Cad podcast,
I'm fine with that.
I have one question I just want to clarify to what you're saying. Because I was with you 100% until we got near the end there, because you transitioned from talking about a 40 and 50 mil base fitting versus one model or 2 models, or at least that's what I kind of heard. Because I do think and this is where I want a clarification from you. I think
Sure.
there's a difference between there's a point here and 40 mils are the only people who can get there, versus there's a point here where only one model can get there. I understand
But
there's a very rare number of situations where that difference can occur, but it can.
You'd have to tell me what the situation that's different, right? Like, so if you assemble that little piece of terrain the way that it is in the core box, right, where it has a second elevation point, and if you have no gantries connected to it, that is a spot where you're going to put one person in the middle and then no one else can stand on it, and the larger base cannot stand on it at all. I'm saying I don't like that on any table. If there's some other specific situation, I guess I'm also in the camp of like, I don't want scatter terrain creating so only one person can stand on the point, or if you put one person in the perfect spot in the middle that nobody else can stand on the objective because of scatter terrain. I also don't like that. So you'd have to tell me of a situation that's separate from those that would apply.
Well, at least for me, before I get past the Dizzard, just raise his hand. You hit the example I was going to use perfectly, so thank you. And I'm with you 100%. I'm okay with, before I go to Dizzard, like my general thoughts on what we've said is I'm okay with spots where 50 mil bases can't fit, as long as it's not, like, I'm okay with a skinny gantry as long as it's not where an objective is. And I'm with
Uh-huh.
you, Omnus, and I think overall I'm okay with spots on the board where everyone can't fit. I don't like objectives where only one model can take it. Dizzard, your thoughts. You had your hand up.
That's basically what I wanted to say. Like,
Okay.
I agree with this point. I do think that it creates an NPE to where who's having fun if I can't play the game, and I will 100% stand behind that. I do think it's interesting to have points like that on the board, but it should not be interfering with objectives.
That was clear when I was talking, right? Like, I don't like them as objectives, like where you can't contest them unless, like,
Matt, I
don't
like
put
how
them on
they
your
were
narrow
both-
tower. Yeah.
I like how both of these guys were like, everything's fine until we actually stated our stance. And then they're
So-
No,
like,
I think
"Whoa,
my
okay,
stance
wait
was
a minute."
misunderstood. They're
You're
great
at least-
terrain
so-
pieces. Don't put an objective on them.
I understood Accuser's stance as he kind of similar with the first part where he's okay with spots where 50 mil can't fit, but I
Don't
thought
put
you
an
were saying
objective on
you
it.
were
Yeah.
okay. I thought you were okay. You never explicitly said no objective, so I was
Don't
like,
put an
oh, so
objective
you're
on it.
cool
That's
with that.
bad, but I like having them because it's cool for like Bane or Hondo or someone
Okay.
that doesn't want to be in a
Accuser,
fist fight
I
to hang out.
100% thought from your statement that you were fine with objectives being on those.
Not
tables.
a-
No, not
Like,
objectives. Use them, and like you. That's why
Okay.
they come in the core box. Like that was
So-
my whole point. Okay, I just want to make sure
kind
that
of-
that was clear. I'm not a lunatic.
Kind of dancing around this point, I think there's something super interesting about having an elevated point that's contesting an objective, but not on the same level. And you
Mhm.
might not think that it's important, but I've had these really interesting games where I just stuck this random piece of terrain by an objective that you could stand on, and then ended up in the game where I went up the ladder to shoot someone off the point and then shoved myself off the terrain to land at the appropriate level. I was like, this terrain ended up being so interesting. I am so glad I tried this.
So I've been waiting for this, and I've been dying to bring this part up, but I think this is the perfect time. If you want an interesting terrain piece that does that, the garage is such a cool terrain piece because it introduces some really interesting tactical decisions. Just with, you got the little garage, you can have an objective there, you can have the objective up top, but it gives you like some really interesting play where you can contest from different elevations while having your model maybe safe, or it just introduces some interesting tactical decisions for you that I think is really cool the more I play with the garage and how it hits the table. So I think that's a super cool thing where you can have terrain and contest it from different elevations. And I think that's something we should be exploring more as we like work tables. Have cool terrain pieces that can interact with it, but not necessarily at the same level.
Before Dizzard says something important, Matt, I just want you to know that water bottle that you drink out of, because it's blue, I think that should be the blue milk bottle forever.
Wow.
So, all right, does you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I was just gonna say I think something cool that isn't done a whole lot on tables, but some of your tables that Nova did have was a point that was on a piece, and then you had a gap, but something that same elevation that you could still contest that same point at.
Fucking love that so
Yes.
much.
I love
Oh
it.
my god, I love that
Because
so much.
you feel so big brain when you're like, I'm gonna go right here, and your opponent's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I still contest. That's so good.
100% love
There
that.
are a
that,
few
yeah.
scenarios I like to put into tables, and we'll cut. So just a quick recap, the kind of first section here, talking about terrain features. So ladders, we had some hot, spicy takes. We won't go into that more. Gantries, I think we were kind of on the same board with density, same kind of thoughts. Difficult play areas, same thing. Elevation, kind of, it seemed like we were on the same boat. Scatter terrain, something we talked about as a topic. I think the big thing with scatter terrain really comes to me, and I want to hold off the deployment one because that's part of the next thing. But how do people feel? Is anyone against scatter terrain on top of terrain?
I'm not
Oh,
against
so-
that, no.
I definitely try to put, so for me personally, I don't put currently. I could see the argument for a little bit more, but I try to put single boxes. Like, so the crate that comes, I try not to put anything much bigger than that, because again, it feels very awkward once you hit a point where like someone can't stand on a point anymore. So I like to intentionally put at least like 3 of the single boxes somewhere that does impact contesting, where it like blocks an edge a little bit, like it's just barely within, where sometimes you can't stand on the other side. Something that's going to make decisions interesting about how you place around it. But I try not to consume too much of the space you can stand on. So I stick to the single boxes. I don't like when there's this huge pile of boxes that's consuming like half of the elevated area that you could even stand on. That's the Omnus take.
Anyway, anything else? I mean, I agree with everything you said about scatter. Anything else to add before we get into kind of try to jump into our next segment here? Dizzard, yes, you.
I think Shatterpoint tables severely lack scatter terrain across the board, and I think more scatter needs to be accepted into this game, because most of the time you look at a board and it's 99% big pieces and then maybe some boxes here and there. I think we need to adopt more scatter terrain into our terrain.
How much scatter terrain do you like on the ground?
I have a number.
Go ahead.
Dizzard, before
not
Matt
shocked.
gives the number.
Yeah.
Let him open the
I
spreadsheets, but in the meantime,
I think I usually have about 7 to 8 pieces of scatter terrain on the ground. Do you think that's not enough? What I'm genuinely curious. I think scatter terrain's super interesting.
I think my biggest issue is the access to scatter terrain. Like, I just don't have a whole lot of Star Wars Shatterpoint scatter terrain, and I think
the
that's probably
take cover
the
box exists.
Okay, Dizzard, stop
That's not
giving me a
even a
Dizzard
lot.
answer.
No, I
What?
don't know.
How much?
The issue is
How
I don't.
much?
The issue is I don't know, because I don't have it. I don't have terrain to use as scatter terrain. Like, I have
you
some
still have it.
pieces. Yeah, I don't have high ground. But it's like, it's very much like
I'm gonna mail you a terrain care package.
there's I
Do
gotta
we all have to pitch in and like paint his fucking terrain and like get it assembled?
I gave
so
him all
Dizzard
that
has access?
terrain. See, he told me he needed more terrain to go with the core set. Had he said scatter, I could have run the printer for like 4 hours and given him a box of scatter
But
terrain.
that's like, what I'm not trying to give like just like an answer, not answer. It's just literally because I don't truly know.
Yeah, you
I just don't know. Like, okay, 20 pieces. How about that? Let's go.
20?
I
Okay,
don't
I'm gonna try.
know.
Okay.
So hear me out, guys, because like I think the take cover box is actually a really good example for it, right? It's got 2 large rocks, 2 small rocks, a number of the core set style boxes. It's got a swoop bike that's like mounted in pieces. Like, it looks like it's actually a really cool piece to go with the garage, because it's like,
Sure.
here's a small vehicle that you're working on.
Yeah.
And 2 like little generator looking things.
Right.
So I think that's actually like a really good like table set of scatter terrain. It's like 6 or 7 distinct pieces.
I'm
which
gonna
I
put
think's
this
a nice-
giant rock in the middle of my Coruscant themed terrain. To me, I like, that's a big point.
Listen, that's a you problem, not a me problem, and also
No, I'm dead serious. So like, I and I know many people like want their board to make sense, and I'm not gonna go high ground because it doesn't match with any of my terrain. Like, and I wish
So-
high ground is fine.
if you-
Don't be
if-
not high
judged on
ground, not high ground. I'd take cover. Sorry.
Take cover is awful, and it
Oh,
is the
take
worst
covers.
product released for Shatterpoint.
And I agree with that,
Oh,
because
for
it,
sure.
that includes the
Shatterpoint,
Cad
okay.
Bane box.
Whoa.
So just throwing it out there, you can see it in the Clone Wars, you can see it in the Mandalorian. There is an exposed mountain face. It's the highest peak on Coruscant. It's Mount Manarai. So there
Diz,
are
you
mountains
just
on
got
Coruscant.
Lord. Accuser just lured you hard.
I knew it was coming too. Like, I knew it was, and
It's in the Mandalorian season 3, that like side
All right.
episode where you just follow the
All right.
doctor, and it's like there.
All right. Basically,
So,
I
don't
think
touch
I think we all agree. I think Shatterpoint just in general needs more scatter terrain, and I think
It
if you
does.
look at
Mhm.
tables across all these events, I feel like there's a lack of scatter terrain. I really do.
So I will tell you, every table that I bring to an event has between. So it's the condensed answer is 10 to 14. The expanded is 8 to 16, because if I have
That's
like
close.
the reason is, so like if I have one thing, like I have a couple scatter pieces for my Geonosian table that they're giant pillars that are probably 2 to 3 decks of playing cards. I kind of consider them 2, not 1. So I always aim between 10 to 14 pieces, 8 to 16 at the max, and I try to put about a third of them up on levels. That every table has that formula applied to it, because I think we need more. I'm totally on board with this. We need more Scatterpoint. Scatter terrain in Shatterpoint. Ooh,
The game's
okay.
Scatterpoint now, guys.
I
You
also
heard it here
want
first.
more scatter terrain that is so tall that it blocks line of sight.
Oh yeah, I've been applying a lot. The geonosion table, the research bay, I have those like crystals that are higher than height too. I'm trying to find things that aren't just like small buildings to be exactly that scatter that blocks line of sight.
Yeah, rocks are the easy one, but I get that some people do city themed things. So if you wanted to go like Coruscant industrial stuff, you can find some interesting like industrial looking pipes or that kind of stuff. Go ahead, Diz.
I just want to hit this up because it's been asked a couple times. Qui-Gon in the chat, Matt, how many tables printed is your goal?
Is my goal 32? I want to
And
be able to
then-
run a 64 person. I'm at 21 primed in dry brush. I have 2 more that are printed. So I'm at 23 printed.
So Matt's
Dan-
hosting a 64-man
Okay.
event in his garage. We'll all be there.
Dan, I need to make sure you understand that that is his goal right now until he hits 32.
Then it's
Then
64.
it's 64, right? Like, I just need you to be clear that it's only that goal until he achieves it. And then he wants to be able to run his own WTC with just his terrain.
We're all people with problems. Matt's just
So-
very specific on his.
For the intimate group of the 3 of us and the thousands or so people who are going to listen to this, don't tell my wife that.
How does she not know? Where do you hide that? That's
No.
32
At
tables.
She
work.
knows I'm going to 32. Don't hide that this was 100% correct, and I will eventually transition.
All right, stretch goal.
Matt's wife. He is going to go to 64. You should probably clean out the garage now.
So
God bless.
another
I wish I lived in
thing-
the Northeast and had a
Janet?
basement
I don't know what
because
her
like, I'd
name
have so
is.
much more terrain and stuff.
I think another thing that like you kind of touched on just there was line of sight, and I think that's worth discussing real quick is how terrain and line of sight and how little line of sight can get impacted by terrain with I would say the majority of what you see commonly at an event.
I've had like 2 instances in all of my games where I felt like line of sight was actually blocked in like every single game I've ever played. And mind you, I felt so fucking clever both times. But 2 instances in every single game of Shatterpoint I've ever played where there's actually been line of sight blocked.
So I think real quick, can we define what blocks line of sight? And as far as I'm like, it's basically if you're on the same elevation as your target and there's a piece taller than range 2, that is what blocks line of sight.
Yes, exactly. Taller than range 2 of both you and your target.
And you're at the same elevation.
Yes, and obviously, well, it's same with though. Like in theory, if they're above
Same
you
and
in
above.
elevation, same and above. Yeah.
Yep.
If they're below you, if like you're if you're at height 2 and they're at height 1, there's something height 3 in between you. You're still above them, but still can't shoot them. Something taller, a height 2 taller
And that's
than
the
you.
exact kind of terrain that I need for some tables. There should be some of that.
Yep. I think the high ground works really well for that because you can't shoot over that pillar in the middle. I think that's a really good feature to add to be able to bring this exact thing into the game.
I've just never actually had the high ground block line of sight. I don't think ever.
I've definitely had players be like, "Hey, I'm going to shoot you through the door, like through the gap at the top of the stairs,"
Yeah.
and you're like, "Well, you can't because there's something." We're like, "Yeah, but I can see through
Oh,
that." And like,
wait,
yeah, but
so
you can't because
That's a good question. Every game I've ever played, everybody has shot through the door.
yeah, you can't.
Rules
Really?
as written. Rules as written. You're not
Rules
supposed
is written,
to.
you can't because it is a height to it's a 2D world, right? From the top down, we don't see that opening.
Interesting.
But what's
the top
funny?
down-
Listeners, I'm curious. Like, I've just never encountered anyone that played it that way.
Oh,
I need a correct, like,
rules
how
is written.
even-
You
Do you want-
absolutely. At
do you
least
wanna be
mine
that
is, you
guy?
absolutely
Then
can't
yes.
shoot
Oh,
over
yeah.
that.
I don't want to be that guy. Like, I'm just.
But the real question is, can you pull someone through that door?
No, it's not.
No,
big
because the
enough.
base physically can't fit through that.
Yeah.
Like I mean,
No, that's not.
Let's
the
let's
question. No,
if-
let's
if
say
the
the
gap
door
was
is big enough.
you absolutely could, in my opinion. because
Yeah,
I'm
but the bases
I
aren't
am-
big enough. That's by design.
Well, I'm saying if there was a gate like that or an opening that was big enough, could you pull under? Yeah, because in my mind it's a gantry
Yeah.
almost.
Yeah,
at
you can
that
push
point.
people out of the garage because that's a
Yeah.
terrain piece that's wide enough on the bottom to where a base can fit through.
Yep.
Can't do it on that little door on the top.
Matt, will you make a note and post that question in the terrain talk?
Oh, how do people feel about or how
Can
do
like
you,
do people play that you can shoot through that doorway?
I'll break
Is
up
it,
my
is it
high
like
ground.
unique? Is it
I'll take
unique
a
to
photo.
Washington?
Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe.
like-
I'll take a little picture and add it in so people can kind of see what we're talking about.
Oops, wrong map.
Yeah, interesting. All right, Matt, what do you have next for us?
So now I want to like quickly go into. We've hit on all the topics. I think of the terrain features. When you're setting up your board, are the things you're looking for? And where I'm going to start with is I'm going to start with my thoughts on this. I always start building the board from the center out. I have a mix of boards where maybe I want an objective on center point. I have some boards where I'll set them up where they're almost like there's a pit where all of the higher elevation stuff is on the outside and the middle is kind of open. But I always like to start in the middle and build out because I think it makes assembling the terrain easier. I actually have a measuring tape in all of my like in my to-go kit for events that are, I just measure 18 by 18 to get to the middle point. I put the first piece of terrain there, or I physically put an objective there and then plan the board around it. So it's where do you start with building terrain, and then also with deployment zone. I'm a big believer of I don't mind putting terrain in deployment zone, but I know that that's been a hot topic issue with some people. So let's start with the how do you assemble the board. So you're setting up your board for game night on your table. Where are you starting, Dizzard?
I'm for it. Like I like terrain in deployment. Like
Did not study for the
Dizzard, are
quiz
you
at all.
even listening to Matt's questions?
I got distracted.
Ignore the in deployment. So okay, you're setting up
Dizzard
your table.
doesn't have terrain. He
Dizzard.
doesn't put together tables.
All right,
He
what was the
shows up
question?
and plays
What was-
games.
Dizzard,
what was the
when
question?
you go to put your first piece of terrain on the table, what are you thinking about? And the example I gave is I always think about what I want the center of the board to
Matt,
look
can
like.
we ask a sub question? Dizzard, have you ever set up a table of
Or does
Shatterpoint
Joey do it
ever?
all? Should we have Joey come on the call? to
Wow. No, I set them up all the time. Just my
Okay.
unpainted, unprimed terrain.
I wasn't sure. I genuinely wasn't sure if you've ever set up a Shatterpoint.
No, I
table.
set up most of the tables, I think.
So
Does it count if it's not painted? Does it count as setting
I've
up
never
a
set it up
Shatterpoint
terrain.
table? Okay, great. Okay.
so
I put numbers by tables. Does that count?
Oh.
All right,
LVO,
anyways.
he's gonna set up his first table. It's gonna be marvelous.
All right. Anyways,
okay.
when I start, I don't know. I just kind of put terrain out there, and then I adjust it as I go. I don't really start with a plan until I start. Like I think your stuff is different because you're organized by boxes, and like your stuff
That's
is like
fair.
very much like this is a thematic. This is it. But if I have like a box of core set terrain, high ground terrain, Imperial City terrain, and all this different thing, I'm kind of just grabbing stuff and putting it out there, and then just kind of going as I go. I don't really have a plan until I have like a shape of it, and then I redefine it, and then make sure that points aren't crazy, and go with different elevations, move elevation points around to different spots. So it's more of a build as you go. I'm chaotic.
and I think it's not a wrong answer. But I like that take. Accuser, how are you building your board? How are you starting?
So I thought the book was really interesting, and oh wait, no, I
The Last Jedi was a great movie.
no, I studied for this quiz. No, so I start. So I start from the center line typically. Dizzard made a really good point earlier, I think, about thinking about like how objectives are on different levels and elevation relativity. So I usually start at the center line with shifting priorities and Sabotage Showdown, with most of it being concentrated like on that center line, and the center line being a big part of how those two objectives are played. I start thinking about like, all right, center line, what pieces do I want to have towards the middle? It's usually the high ground tower to start, and maybe the garage now that it's out. And start thinking about how that lines up on the center line, just to make the center line interesting, and then kind of building it out from there. I think Diz is on the money. Like, you kind of just feel it out and put pieces in place. The marked mats really helped up my game, because now I can actually see like, yeah, like this piece of terrain is going to have like opportunities for like two objectives across two different scenarios to be on it, and how do I line all of this up? Our gantry is interesting. Hi, Ron.
Which pop is that?
That's Ron Swanson.
He's grumpy and judging your cheaty marked mats, but
Oh,
They're-
that's what
they're
that was.
great. But I think
God bless
Omnus and
you,
I, we both
accuser,
come.
and your marked mats.
Omnus and I come out of MCP, and I think they're a huge game changer for MCP. I bought one at LVO and took it home with me, and I've got several for MCP. I've got one now for Shatterpoint for my war game. Don't regret it, because boy, does it make setup so much easier. This is the way.
But all right, so you're a little more freeform like Diz. I like it. All right.
Yeah.
Omnus, are you a freeform jazz musician or are you a scripted classical composer?
So, I honestly have a different answer than all of you.
Well, sorry, I didn't make a category for that one, so you can't do that.
Yes. So sorry, I don't have a category.
Your blue screen just
So
wiped out most of HK47.
the vast majority of my games, I have set up the tables, and most of the time it is with the same set of terrain. And so I do think probably half the time I probably start from the middle, but I usually come up with some idea of what I want to do with the terrain each day to do something different. And so that is what guides my structure. And so to give you some examples, like one day I'm like, remember how we were talking about when a gantry can contest another point that's on a different piece of terrain? I'm like, okay, my goal today is to set up 2 of these. Right. And so that's my guiding line. I'm like, what do I have to do with the terrain to achieve that? Then another day I was like, I always have terrain in the middle. What happens if the middle objective is on the ground? Let me set up the terrain in kind of a U shape instead. Or, just something. I try to do something different every week with the terrain. And that's what I fucking love about Shatterpoint, is that you can have one pile of terrain and do something different with it every single week and have a totally different experience. And so, yeah, I generally like come up with some sort of idea. Setting up my 2 tables for this event yesterday, this was more of like my first time setting it up, where like, how can I position this train to cover as many of the possible objectives as possible, just to make sure that like it wouldn't be like sabotage comes up, nothing's on elevated terrain, stuff like that. And so that was a slightly different plan, but still kind of functionally the same idea, where I'm like, okay, my goal is to have a reasonable amount of objectives on elevated terrain for all 3 setups. And so that was kind of my approach, which still often means that something on the midline is my first piece of terrain, but not always.
I think that's where marked mats are kind of cool, because like Matt, you mentioned using like a tape measure and measuring it out. Like I'm more visual and I can just quickly see it setting up one. Maybe the tape measure is more the classical composer way of doing it, but the marked mats are great because I can
Matt,
visually
want
see
you
this
to
is
know,
impacting these objectives. Yeah.
I was trying not to bring up marked mats so that we didn't have to get into this. I just need to be clear that Phil did this, not me.
Don't worry,
I did it.
I'm gonna put that one aside. We'll deal with that on a later date. One of the things that you said, and I mentioned earlier, and I want to highlight one more time, is terrain in the dead center of the table. I think if you just think about most of the tables you've set up, the center objective is on elevation, right? After every event, how big or how small, I ask people for like feedback about terrain. One of the most common positive feedbacks I get, not like, hey, the terrain was cool, it looked great, blah, 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 but people saying like, how do you feel about the table design? People were like, oh, it was so neat playing on a table where it was almost like a bowl, or like it was where the middle objective was pretty open with just some scatter around it to stop you from getting like, maybe you can body in a spot where you don't get shoved off. I hear a lot of people say like, that was cool. I've never played on a table like that. It made me think differently. So I think you should try, if you're listening at home and you haven't done this, set up your next table with an open space in the middle and just some scatter around it. I think you're going to find it brings a lot to the game.
This jazz musician's going to try to toilet bowl it next time.
So the last question is a quick thumbs up, thumbs down.
This jazz musician is going to try to toilet
Trying
bowl
to just
it.
move through that one.
You'll never hear that sentence again. That is a unique sentence in the entirety of the English language that has never been done in that
order.
order.
Make a shirt for Phil where that's the quote on the back of
That's
it.
too many words for a shirt.
Fuck no, it's not. Oh my god, that would be so funny. If you don't do it, I'm gonna have to get the art and make one for him.
So,
Go ahead, Matt. Sorry.
quick vote, thumbs up, thumbs down. How do we feel about terrain in deployment? I will start. I am very pro. Not like you have to do it, but I am for it. I like it. I think it makes the opening die roll matter.
It matters so much because it takes away that preset deployment that everyone does on shifting priorities and sabotage showdown.
Agreed.
It shakes up the formula by putting even just a box throws things off, and you have to think differently about it.
Agreed. So that's your being accuser. Dizzy, where are you at with that?
Thumbs up.
Omnus?
I will tell you so many times I've set up a table and made it so I can't get to the objective. I was like, and it was only on my side of the table, which I set up. I was like, I didn't even think about it. Yeah, I'm definitely for in the deployment. The only exception would be if you were setting up at a convention where the tables are like 3 feet wide, and so there's no extra card space. Don't fucking put terrain there. Like that is if you have a 3-foot table and the mat's taking up the whole table, so you players are gonna have to put their cards on the mats. Don't fucking put terrain there.
That's a fair point. All right. I mean, I think that's the kind of the big stuff. And then the only thing I want to add for if you're trying to help supply terrain for like a local event, I think diversity is really important. And I think basically what I would say is if you're thinking about how to set up terrains at home, terrain at a local event, terrain at a major convention, basically take the min max of what we've kind of talked about and just play around with it, right? It seems like it's just try something different. Omnus, I loved your idea of, hey, I thought this was cool, so I'm going to intentionally put this on the table for this next game to really highlight it and enhance it and see what works. So I mean, that's everything I really thought to hit on for terrain. Any other thoughts or anything we think we kind of missed here overall? Just leaving this open to the group.
Dude, no, Matt, I just want to say shout out to you. Thanks for we know we all wanted to talk about this topic. We appreciate you and your psychopathic devotion to terrain taking the lead on this. So thanks, dude.
Yeah, no, I think it
love
was
my
a
terrain.
really good job on the outline and everything, because I think there's a lot to talk about with terrain in this game. And you've definitely devoted the most time to all of us thinking about it, probably more than the three of us combined.
All I did for the topics, I went back through our terrain talk channel in the Discord, and I just pulled keywords, the most commonly used keywords, and they were ladders, gantry, density, scatter, and then arguments about difficult. So that's all I did.
I've built my table. I haven't built 21 of them, not for this game.
Accuser, the only problem I have with your comment, I am fully willing to accept that Matt has thought about terrain more than I have. But if you and Dizzard cannot make up the difference between the amount that I've thought about it and Matt has thought about it, I am fucking disappointed in both of you. Like, Matt is definitely number one here, and I think I'm fairly number two. But if you guys have thought about terrain so little that we can't even the three of us combine into Matt,
let us know in the comments below if you think I haven't put enough thought into terrain. You've heard my hot takes the entire episode. I'm open to feedback.
All right. That's me for terrain. Thank you all for indulging us and following along.
God, I hope this was fun for the listeners. I do think this was an interesting
I've had a blast with
us.
this one. This one was good. Yeah.
I just want to say, if we didn't have at least some to put into the train, I don't know how we spent 2 hours talking about terrain.
Yeah.
Just saying.
I mean, it was a half of it was shitting on Fleetwood McDonald's. So,
you're gonna burn.
I don't think we started the train talking until 45 minutes in. So
no, yeah, you're not wrong.
Yeah.
You're not wrong. But anyways,
we did an hour-ish of train talk, which is honestly probably less than I expected.
Yeah,
I tried to condense the topics a little bit. So
yeah, no, you did great, Matt.
Shatterpoint was awesome. All right, we're gonna go ahead and move into Unlearn What You Have Learned. We do have one from Qui-Gon Din here. he recommends try Leia Freedom Fighter with Chirpa. It has legs, I promise. And I think a lot of people are actually starting to like realize this. I haven't seen a lot more Ewoks lately, and Chirpa to be included in that. So I think it's something that people should like forget is bad and actually go play it.
I think the reason for that is because secondary Luke exists now. The Freedom Fighter Leia, Luke, whatever his subtitle is, and Rebel Commandos, like I don't think you even need to play it with full Ewoks. I think that's just a solid Rebel package that you can bring. You get, I mean, the Commandos focus and hunker in it for a single force, and it's 8 dice re-rolling 2 dice. One of them is going to get coordinated fire exposed. Like they punch so hard, and I think that just gives Ewoks legs. Chirper, low gray being whatever, or you could even run Han and Ewoks at that point. Like I think that package opened the door to Ewoks just being really scary.
Yeah, and
So I agree
then
with Accuser that Freedom Fighter Leia is worth playing outside of Ewoks. Din, as much as I love you, my answer to this is I agree that Ewoks have legs, technically, but those stubby ass little furry legs will not touch the side of the table that I'm playing on.
fair enough. All right. And then for my unlearn what you have learned, because I want to do his little shout out. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, no, totally.
I honestly, I'm gonna say it again. I'm gonna keep saying it. Han is not a revenge character. Get that out of your head and go play Han with that in mind. He has a revenge tactic or ability, but it's not his core kit. Matt, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I did want. So I meant to mention this earlier in the in discussing what we've done last week. So one of the guys who I met at our local, who is new to playing it, actually going out and playing it like tournament stuff. He's a web designer by trade and a big fan of data and metrics and organization like me. So he actually made a website that's just a free resource he's kind of doing on the side, pointshatter.com. But basically what it does is you can put your 2 squads you're listing and click on a character, and it will tell you every relevant trigger that could happen, either that your character does or somebody else in the squad does. I found it helpful for like if you're trying to get better at remembering all the other interactions. It's kind of a cool thing. So check it out. I'll throw it in the Discord. I meant to do it earlier today anyway. So
And then I'll go ahead.
think about it now.
I'll go
Did
ahead
you
and
guys
pin it.
know that Matt liked data and organization? Because I am
And
just
he
learning
found
this
a
right now.
friend that does
was
it.
that was fucking insane. It was like boom, biggest hot take of Rogue support. Matt likes
This is getting
data.
out of hand. Now there are 2 of them.
Yeah, go ahead and put it in there. I will pin it. Just put it in Cantina, and I will pin it into Cantina if anybody wants to take a look at the link. With that being said, Omnus, take us home.
Just remember, nerds, the most Star Wars thing that you can do is look down at Han Solo and know that he's going to disappoint you and not be a hero. And then he brings it home and you go 3-0 with the Han, baby. Because deep down, he always comes through for you. Later, nerds.
Fleetwood Mac is good.
I'm sorry, but the most Star Wars thing you could do after that should have been throwing someone off a gantry and them like just kind of surviving that fall.
I had one prepared this week. I was like, I actually feel like I got to shout out Han because I actually think he's kind of a boring Star Wars character at all. So that was the one chance that you had for like a Han like
but
special shout out.
We've now talked about him 2 episodes back to back. He's not going to have. This is a never again thing. No.
No, Han as like a character, not in Shatterpoint, is what I was saying is not interesting. I know I will probably never give him another special shout out.
The next episode is going to be a love
Han.
letter to Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Why am I excited to see him as Thunderbolt Ross and Hulk out?
Ooh.
Yeah.
Okay, that I can talk about. Guys, my instinct right now is that this was the best episode of Rogue Support.
This one was fire. I really like this one.
When we were going through like the beginning banter, I'm like, this is great content. I love it. And then I looked at the clock and I'm like, oh shit. Like We're 45 minutes in and we haven't even gotten through all of the what we've been doing. So I'm like, oh, this is fun.
Same. I was like, oh god, like
Yeah.
this is gonna be a long one.
I agree overall. I think the content is gonna be really good and kind of evergreen too, which I like. So
As long as we don't get to
Oh.
3
This is gonna
hours,
be an
we're okay.
episode that other podcasters listen to, and they're like, I fucking wish that we did that.
Was there a GT we could have talked about instead?
You guys want to just read Longshank stats to the listeners?
You want to go back 3
I
weeks?
do love stats. Come on, man.
We got Qui-Gon Din in the chat. I will continue to simp for Lobo, and he spelled it Lobo. He spelled it the correct way.
Look,
No, he's Lobot. He's gonna be my best friend. Him and his DJ headcuffs. Like I'm here
Dan,
for it.
have you listened to the bonus episode yet? The last bonus episode. I just need to know before I spoil anything. Can you respond in the chat? Like, have you listened to it? Desert, I did not pull up Twitch today, so you're gonna have to actually tell me if he responds.
I'll let you know. He's been quick about responding, so it should be quick.
Yeah. Yeah, no, Din's fucking
there
great.
it is.
Hello.
So Josh says he just joined, so probably not. Gonna be testing out more armor tonight. What he said.
I liked the Armorer's box when my buddy ran that kit. Paz was nuts. He was just like blowing Dark Troopers away. I was like, oh, so Paz is a problem. I'm gonna let Dark Troopers deal with that.
Yeah.
I'm going over this way with everyone that matters.
He
Matt,
said
I do want. Oh,
I was gonna say he said he listened to it 3 times.
all right. God bless you, Din, and I'm glad that the 4 of us, and probably Sarah Cruel as well, so the 5 of us can unite against Diz and his fucking hatred of good characters.
If you haven't, and this is for anyone in chat, if you like comic books, which I mean, a few of us have played MCP, we probably have an appreciation for comics, but Charles Soule did a Lando comic book run. It was a 5-issue miniseries where he and Lobot go on a heist and steal the Emperor's private yacht, and it's like the best characterization of Lobot that's ever been done because he is a character that doesn't get a lot of attention, just kind of generally. And the work that they do in the comics with Lobot's phenomenal. But overall, great comic. It's, I think, one of the best miniseries that Marvel Star Wars has done in the past decade.
Tinkleberry said, "All right, I'm sold. We'll check it out."
Nice.
Yeah,
Bless
good.
You gotta love a good
guys,
Lando heist.
I really enjoyed this whole chat. Was just like a lot of fun.
agreed.
We kind of let some of that bonus episode angst.
Dude, Accuser, I just
I loved
watched
it.
Force Awakens last night
Oh,
for
yeah.
like the first time in probably like a couple of years.
Mhm.
Do you know how hard it was to not derail a conversation? Just be like, Accuser, can we just nerd out about a Force Awakens for like 15 minutes?
I don't know the last time I watched that one. I usually,
Okay.
like, if I want one of the sequels to throw on, I go Last Jedi because it's the best.
But
Thank you.
I honestly, I read a tweet that was just like, oh, do you guys like credit Force Awakens with how like gritty it is in the sense of like you can see people holding blasters and feeling the recoil and things like that? And I was like, I don't know what happened, but this tweet just made me want to watch Force Awakens. And I stopped whatever I was watching, some random like crime documentary, and then switched and started watching Force Awakens.
So they actually did do that in the prop weapons in the sequels, and in Rogue One, the blasters, the models actually got recoil, so the guns do
Yeah.
kick, which is super cool. But
Right.
they also had problems up even in The Last Jedi. Laura Dern, like you can see her mouth pew pew when she tries to stun the mutineers. Like,
Well, you should watch Force Awakens again, and then let's like share our thoughts. We could even do it on Discord.
I'm gonna have to do
next
that.
time.
Yeah, probably tomorrow night. Remind me.
All right.
Maybe I live tweet it or live Discord chat it.
Ooh, I'm down.
All right, everybody sync the play button, and we all watch together. Live thoughts.
Qui-Gon Jinn says, as much as I am not really a fan of the sequels, it still isn't going to stop me from watching some Praetorian Guard and Kylo Ren on the table.
Fuck yeah, dude.
I
Dude,
think the
is there
sequels are
any
perfect
trooper-
Shatterpoint content.
Is there any trooper cooler than the Praetorian Guard? And the answer is fuck no.
No, they even had like cool stuff in the Mandalorian with the Praetorians. Like,
Right?
they're gonna happen in the game eventually. There's the Royal Guard's gonna happen in the game, but like, I played a lot of Legion, and sequel content was always kind of like divisive. Like, do you even have enough to make a full like Resistance army like canonically? But boy, is it perfect for Shatterpoint. Like, can you imagine like the Rey, Finn, Poe box, or the Kylo, Phasma, First
I
Order
don't like solo
Stormtrooper
support,
boxes?
so can it be Poe and BB-8 as the support unit?
Yeah, of course it can.
Okay. Thank
Because
you.
of
That's all I
Shatterpoint, we've
want.
got Han and Chewie,
Yeah.
and BB-8's going to be the hero.
BB-8 is almost certainly the best character of those four.
If he doesn't have a little thumbs up on the model, like, I'm going to be kind of sad about it with a little torch.
All right.
I don't know why that tickled me.
Because you just watched it, and that's one of the funniest things he
I
does.
know, I just the little like flame.
His
like,
little lighter.
Would you like to light your cigarette? Ow!
That's more a Chopper thing. Whee!
No, Chopper would just kill you.
The Chopper grabbing two blasters with his little head arms and just rolling on a single wheel. I die every time I see it. I love that. That's why Chopper's the best. But they didn't even do enough to capture that. Like, he should have had way more guns.
All right, it's only like 9 for me, guys, so I could keep talking, but I know that probably some of you need to get sleep.
I'm just waiting for Dizzard leaning in real close and going, all right. And then you guys can
All
right
right.
through it.
All right, I'm gonna go to sleep now. I'm gonna listen to Fleetwood Mac, and it's
I am
bedtime.
actually. I was
and
gonna send you a whole bunch of
dream
greatest
about
hits.
Thrawn, and
Yeah.
and I don't have terrain opinions.
Wow. You forgot the wow. What's funny was when you first did the
take.
when you first said you don't like Fleetwood Mac a little bit there, that I know you're obviously joking about because they're one of the greatest bands of all time. My wife heard me at the other side of the house say wow.
I want you to know I don't think I could name a Fleetwood Mac song if my life was on the line.
It's okay. I'll learn you. I'll learn you today.
All right, you want to hear my real music hot take? Beatles are overrated.
No, that's a fact. That's
not a hot
absolutely
take.
fact. That's a fact. Yeah, Rolling Stones all the way. Let's go.
I'm sorry. The original boy band, don't care.
Yeah, agreed.
We all live in a yellow submarine. We get it. You were high. Like, novel.
Yeah. You couldn't say you're high, but you want to talk about being high? Whatever.
Okay, we got one last hot take from Qui-Gon Jinn. Clone Wars 3 is better than Filoni's Clone Wars.
Wait, what?
Clone Wars 03 is better than Filoni's Clone Wars.
The Jenny Tartakovsky 2D one? I mean, if you just like cartoon go pew pew, yeah.
Dan, can you elaborate? Like, I don't think I understand what you're saying at the moment.
The Clone Wars 03 is the 2003 2D animated Jendy Tartakovsky one where like Mace Windu fights an entire seismic tank and
sorry, if that's what he's saying,
they're just a tentacle monster.
I cannot disagree more because Clone Wars the cartoon is the best Star Wars thing ever.
So Samurai Jack Clone Wars.
Yeah,
Samurai Jack Clone Wars is like cartoon go pew pew, and that's like it. Like the other Clone Wars actually does like some character development and
Ladder Gate's over.
stuff.
We're on Clone Wars Gate now. Let's go.
I love the 2D. Like the ARC Trooper episode's fantastic, but yeah, I mean, I'm more Captain Rex than Captain Fordo. Captain Rex is a real character.
Oh, I thought Dizzard was like taking off his headset and walking away.
Dizzard's like, I'm gonna close the button eventually. Like, I'm gonna wake up in the morning. You guys will still be talking about Clone Wars. Dude, Dan, you should go back and look in the lore chat. I posted I ended up making top 10 of my favorite episodes or episode arcs
and you missed
of the Clone Wars cartoon.
He says, but Grievous was actually scary as fuck in the Clone Wars.
That is true. The Gindi stuff, Grievous is.
But it's not canon. He wasn't even scary in Revenge of the Sith. He's a mustache twirling cartoon villain. That's his entire gist.
Which is definitely Dizzard's current facial hair change.
Wow.
Dizzard is General Grievous.
Dizzard is the mustache twirling villain of Rogue Support.
Yeah.
Dizzard, I do love, like, so we are live on Twitch, but we're not recording anymore.
Yeah.
I love that you have become the heel of the podcast.
don't know
I think it's
why.
fucking hilarious, and I never thought that would be one of our shticks. But I don't know if you did it intentionally or if it was accidental, but it's fucking genius, dude.
Maybe I'm just a bad person. Like
It's just so easy.
yeah, it's easy. It's easy.
Anyway.
It's easier to be evil.
The Pong Krell of Rogue Support. Got it.
Wow.
All right, who's the Dogma?
Dogma?
Dogma's the clone that kills Pong Krell in the elevator or
I
in the
thought.
prison cell. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because Rex was like thinking about killing him, but one of the other clones killed him first.
Yeah,
I just didn't
the
remember
clone
the
that
name.
like henches for him the entire time.
All right.
Honestly, as much as I would love to say that it was me, I don't think I could kill Pong Krell. I'm like, dude, you have a double-bladed lightsaber. You're too fucking cool. Like, I can't kill you.
Double bladed lightsabers, like
Yeah,
yeah.
that's too
Gnarly.
dope. Like,
Time into Dizzard. All right.
I'm just make that a soundbite. Just all right, and then. Thank you everybody for hanging out on the Twitch. It has been an episode. I don't know what else to call it but that.
all
It was a
right. Everyone,
blast.
go get
We had
some
fun with it.
Fleetwood Big Macs. Boo!
Flatwood Mick.
We'll see you.